Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to yet another Warski Live. How you all doing? Thank you all for waiting. It's a little bit of a later show, but today's going to be quite an interesting topic. I'm sure a lot of people know what we're going to be talking about. It's the entire liberalist movement that Sargon has started, and it's caused a lot of controversy, to say the least, between a lot of people, the alt-right, old fans of his. A lot of people like it. And we're going to be basically dissecting a lot of what it's about and going deeper into the actual principles of the movement, the liberalist movement. And of course, joining me as co-host, as always, JF. What's up, buddy?
Andy, I refuse to answer to your question. I am currently indulging in liberalistism, and I need to determine if you are a group or an individual. Andy, are you an individual?
Yes, I am an individual.
Okay, because if you had been a group, I would have dropped my pants and took a shit on your head. You would have no rights at all. Okay, now that you're an individual, I'm willing to interact with you.
Thank God.
So I'm doing good, Andy.
Good. I saw Chris finally messaged on Twitter saying that he's alive and not kidnapped by you. That's what everyone was thinking, that you murdered Chris. But no, he's alive and he's well. And we're gonna go around now the panel and introduce everyone. First, let's introduce a liberalist himself. V, what's up, V?
Hello. I think you guys already know me. I have no idea why I have 70,000 subscribers and why people listen to me. But yeah. Also,
been saying this for 10 years.
10 years? I haven't done YouTube in 10 years. Don't lie. don't lie on the Andy Worski show.
He predicted it. He predicted
Jeff Holiday was the last person caught lying, and Andy then chimped out a little bit. Yeah, so it's 4 a.m. for me. I told Andy this, but he really wanted me to come. So if I'm going to stumble a little bit or talk a little bit slower, that's why.
Yeah, it'll be normal. It'll be like normal. It's business as usual when you stumble, right?
No, this is going to be even worse.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. We also have the academic agent. What's up, dude?
Oh, hello, Mr. Warski. Thanks for having me on. I'm basically I guess a smaller channel, although according to Coach Red Pill statistics, I'm like the 16th out of the 129. So there you go. But I basically speak from I guess a conservative or right wing stance on a lot of issues. But I made this video called "Declaring for the Right" because I always used to say I was a centrist. But then it got to the point where I was like, hold on, all of my views are right wing, so I might as well just declare. And plus, the left was so bad. Literally, since I've done that, all I've done is fight with the alt-right, which is kind of ironic. You know, you declare for the right, and then you spend all your time talking to race realists. So, but it's actually been quite interesting because, you know, he's so used to kind of schooling leftists on basic economics, and you know, you can just own socialists so easily and SJWs and so on. And suddenly, like, we're talking to people like JF and others, and all of a sudden it's like, oh fuck, we have to really think about what we're talking about here. So yeah, I've actually found it quite stimulating to really have to think through exactly. It's a lot harder to fight to your right than to your left, I'm finding. So
yeah, it's not a low-hanging fruit, as they say, basically.
Right.
Yeah, cool. All right, we have Todd Lewis. What's up, buddy?
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me on, Andy.
Thanks for being on. And you want to give yourself a brief intro?
Yeah, sure. I run the Praise of Folly podcast, where I do basically talk about issues, political, historical, economic. I do interviews. I do debates. I'll be taking this from the Christian traditional perspective and what I think is wrong with liberalism from there.
All right, perfect. And Greg Johnson, right? It's Greg Johnson?
That's right.
Yeah, what's going on, man? Can you give yourself a brief intro as well?
Yeah, I'm Greg Johnson. I run Countercurrents Publishing, North American New Right, which is the webzine of Countercurrents Publishing, an occasional print journal. I have a YouTube channel, a tiny little YouTube channel called Countercurrents TV. And I am a white nationalist. I describe myself as a new rightist, meaning that I believe in taking a meta-political approach to laying foundations for political change. And the goal of my activism is to create racially and ethnically homogeneous homelands for all white peoples. But I'm especially focused on the North American continent because that's where I live.
All right.
All right.
Awesome.
So today, our subjects that we are starting with, and you can bring it wherever you like, but I like this subject, the question of should cake bakers be forced to bake a cake for a gay couple if they don't want to? I like this question because it touches upon religious liberty, it touches upon questions of freedom of expression, and it slices very well between the current liberalist movement that Sargon has started, and I would say the traditional libertarian and some part of the right too. And so first I'd like to go around the table and ask to everyone where do they stand on that question, and maybe give a little brief statement of principles. Why would you force a cake baker to bake a cake for a gay couple if they don't want to? Or why would you not do that? So if we start with maybe the academic agent, I believe you've made a video about this.
Yeah, so I made a video the other day called "Bake the Cake," and to me, I think this boils down to what Isaiah Berlin calls positive and negative liberty. So, positive liberty is the freedom to do something, and negative liberty is the freedom from. Like, for example, we all have the freedom from being punched in the face when we walk down the street, as an example. We all have a freedom from being kidnapped and put in a dungeon. Whereas positive liberty is basically the freedom to do any of those things. And the way I reasoned it through in that video, I basically said that it comes down to exactly the nature of the request. So if this baker does not usually for example, provide a service where he writes pro-gay messages on top of a cake, then essentially the gay couple are trying to force him they are trying to compel him to do something against his will, and they have no right to do that. So in that case, I'd rule in favor of the baker. Like, he shouldn't be made to write pro-gay messages on a cake. However, if the gay couple just want to like buy a muffin, which is just like sitting on the shelf, then the way I argued it through was they have a freedom from discrimination. So the baker in that case should just sell them. It's not interfering with anybody's negative liberty for the baker to just sell him that muffin that's sitting on the shelf. So that's the way I reasoned it through. There's a little bit of nuance in there. It depends on to make it a lot easier. Let's just say you walk into a 7-Eleven or a Walmart and you're buying a can of Coke. You take it up to the counter, and the guy behind the counter says, "No, I'm not going to serve you." Why not? Well, I just don't want to. You're black or you're gay. And I think in those circumstances, probably it's a violation of the customer's negative liberty. So I rule in favor of the customer. That's
right, I take huge issue with this, but we'll hear other people around first. V, what is your position on the bake the cake stuff?
Yeah, so forcing someone to bake a cake and write something on it, not only does it violate his liberty because he is forced to do something he doesn't want, it also violates the freedom of creativity, because he is now creating something, like he is writing something that he disagrees with. And then you can basically go to a gay wedding and say, yeah, look, this bakery, which is a Christian bakery, is in favor of gay marriage. And that's absolutely disgusting and shouldn't exist in a free society.
But you do think that the person should be compelled to sell the cake if it's already prepared?
So this is a very interesting issue you brought up. I will bring Romania because it's a contemporary issue that's happening here. Romania is a majority white country, but we do have ethnical Hungarians who live in Romania, in Transylvania, and they are a majority in certain towns and refuse to sell products to Romanians. This is in order to get Romanians to live from those towns, and eventually they will want to advocate for independence, which is against the Romanian constitution. and it's going to end up with violence, as probably you're going to see a similar situation which happened in Spain with the Spanish police beating the living shit out of the Catalonians, right? I think, you know what? Fuck it. People shouldn't sell if they don't want to. And if they're going to end up with the police beating the living shit out of them because they're breaking the Constitution, that's their choice. So yeah, I think that you should give the baker, or the person in the store the decision to sell or not. Now,
Okay.
the moment you say this, you also need to understand that, for instance, a person can also choose not to sell to a racist, which means that the bank might choose not to give money to a racist. A landowner might choose to kick a racist out of their homes, so on and so forth. So if you don't want the standard that if you're open to the public, you should sell to the public, period, then you're opening the door for also this type of discrimination that you can see in America, basically on ideological thought. It's like you're a racist, you're not going to get service. You're the daily stormer. And I know the people are saying, well, they can go to another a shop. Well, yeah, they can, but what if all the shops don't want to deal business with the racist? But for the record, I'm in favor. I think the free market eventually will fix it. So yeah.
All right, impressive position here by V. We have a libertarian V coming to a different conclusion than the academic agent, who's our right-wing speaker. What a surprising night. Todd Lewis, what do you think about the gay bake the cake compelling?
Well, I would argue, I think I would be in agreement with so far with the academic agent and V in the sense that you shouldn't compel someone to bake the cake if they don't want to. I mean, really, what this bake the cake is really a concerted quasi-Marxist attack on Christians. Nobody pulls these bake the cake stunts on Muslim bakers or Sikh bakers, which there are plenty in this country. They don't pull those stunts on those people. It's more of a directed attack on a certain religious group in this country. But the other context is that it's not really. I would agree with the libertarian consensus up to the point that you shouldn't be able to compel people to serve you if you don't want them to. What's interesting here is the question that's being brought up is, what if somebody gets completely locked out of society? Because nobody wants to trade with them. Nobody wants to sell them anything. I mean, to some extent, we already have that now, right? These people are called criminals. And if they're not criminals, in earlier times, we had people that were sort of like outlaws. They were outside the laws of the society. So we're really dealing with a question of who's in the society and who's out of the society. So I think we would all agree that some people just don't get served and some people do. The question is, how are these lines drawn? And that's where I would probably object more with V and academic agent on this point.
All right, we have one more libertarian on the question. The academic agent is looking more and more isolated. In fact, I'm thinking about putting a little star on his icon so that he can be recognized as the communist that he is. And finally, I'd like to hear Greg Johnson on the issue. You've been talking a lot about race, about a form of freedom of association, in fact, between people of the same race. And it's interesting to hear you on this particular subject, which does not involve race, but could, because the discrimination and stance against gay people could also be reproduced in a context where people would like to serve people of a certain race or not serve people of another race. So what would be your position on this, Greg?
I think with most businesses, businessmen should simply have the right to refuse service to anyone. But there are certain qualifications that I would put on that. Really, the major qualification is if the person can go somewhere else, if there are alternatives, then no businessman should be compelled to serve anybody. And they can have any reason they want. You show up with no shirt on or no shoes on, they have the right to serve you. You show up filthy with a cloud of flies around you, they don't have to admit you to their restaurant, things like that. I think that most businesses should simply be able to do that, and it's a matter of discretion, and there should be no problem with that. And I think that's actually a way of maintaining basic civilized social standards in a society. Now, if though we're dealing with a situation where there are no alternatives, that becomes problematic, because what's happening is, in effect, a person is being excluded from society as a whole. And that is not a decision that I think a business, a private institution, should be allowed to make without any kind of oversight from the collective, from the state, from representatives of the collective interests. And so if we're dealing with something like a natural monopoly, if you're an anarchist and the power company doesn't like your politics and they want you to freeze in the winter, that should not be allowed. If
I really like.
If there is,
go ahead.
Yeah, if there is basically one useful platform for buying and selling books, like Amazon.com, and they decide they don't like selling your books, they should not be allowed to do that. So I believe that things like Facebook, Twitter, utility companies, anything where there is a natural monopoly, and where a business saying, we simply elect not to do business with these people, it's our sovereign right, in effect excludes people from society as a whole, that should not be permitted. So I am absolutely for regulating the major platforms, PayPal, Amazon.com, Twitter, Facebook, all of them, when they try and exercise ideological censorship and discrimination. Also, I'd go beyond that. I would say that we should have legislation in America that bans outright any politically correct terms of service or employment. So Google would not be able to run their totalitarian social experiments. It would simply be against the law for them to even breathe a word of the kind of nonsense that that's now come out with this James Damora lawsuit. So that's my basic position on it. In terms of small businesses where there are alternatives, I think that there should be a great deal of discretion. In terms of big businesses and monopolistic type businesses, no. The public interest requires that these be regulated to basically permit all people to use their services who can actually pay.
I really like this grounding in antitrust law rather than academic agent, who seems to be grounding his thinking in positive versus negative rights, and we'll get back to it. Now, someone on the chat reminds me, academic agent is not a communist because communists do not have cakes. And so I'm sorry for calling him a communist. He's a somewhat left-wing capitalistic thinker.
Hold on, he can be the leader of a communist nation and they have cakes?
Academic agent. It seems to me that when we offer freedom to people, it is both negative and positive in nature. If I have the freedom to choose my healthcare, not only do I have the freedom to choose between different hospitals, but I have the freedom to decide that I do not want to go to a hospital too. Freedom is not freedom if you only limit it to the positive or negative domain. And in the same way, I, as a YouTube creator, I'm not forced to bake a cake for gay people. And in fact, if I make a cake for myself or I make a cake for some people in my family, I'm not forced to offer it to the whole public. So how do you ground your thinking here, knowing that there's lots of people who make cakes and they're not forced to give it to whoever the state decides they should give it to?
There's a couple of little nuances here that I need to talk about. And it's funny you mentioned antitrust, because I am against antitrust laws, kind of controversially. So all of this is based on this idea that when you go into a shop, you are effectively entering into a trade, okay, with the shopkeeper. Now, this works in a scenario like, let's say if you went to the bazaars of Iran, like a place like Isfahan, where they've got real live bazaars, and you go in, you want to buy like a copper pot or something, and it's literally like the scene from Aladdin, where he's trying to buy something and they barter over it. I'll give you 2 for this. No, I want 3. Okay, I'll give you 2.5. No, I'll walk away. Or no, I'm not going to do the deal. Okay, and in that scenario, of course, you can see very clearly where the limits are on service. Nobody should be forced to sell anything they don't want to. But in the real world, especially in the West, when a business puts a sign on the door saying open for business, it is implied in that sign that we are open for business and that we are willing to trade all of these items that are on the shelf for these and for these set prices, because we don't do this bartering most of the time in the West. You'd all agree, right? You don't go to Walmart and say, actually, I'll give you like 50p for that. I'll give you 50 cents for the can of Coke instead of $1 or whatever it is. Okay. So I'm talking about the scenario where somebody has walked into a shop, they've picked an item up from the shelf. After seeing the "we are open and willing to do business" sign, they have put it on the counter. At that point, if the person behind the counter says, yeah, no, I'm just not going to do this deal, I just don't like the look of you, I'm not sure if we could have a society where that was allowed to happen. Now, if we had a different scenario, let's think about some businesses that do this all the time, like nightclubs, okay, with bouncers on the door, with security guards on the door. Now, so nightclubs do this all the time. They will, in fact, the criteria could be like, well, the security guard likes the look of the pretty girl, so she comes in, and the big fat guy, he's just going to be in the queue all night, right? We've all seen that scenario. Now, that is absolutely fine because it's happening before they've stepped in the door. But once you're already in, I think it's unfair to expect the person to give the person on the counter the power to say, no, I'm not going to serve you after you've walked through the door. You'd have to put a sign up saying, we do not serve these sorts of people in this store, and make it really, really clear up front. And if you wanted to do that and go back to the days of like segregation, so be it. You know, I'm not going to force anyone not to do it. But I think once you're already in, it's fair game to serve that person then.
So it's
otherwise you'd have chaos. Otherwise you'd have chaos, right? You'd have people randomly refusing service all over the shop. So
there's something that I'd like to add here. Well, one of the fault lines that's going to happen here is the nature of freedom. Now, V and you, academic agent, and even many on the left have this argument between positive and negative liberty. Negative liberty is, people don't do things to you without your consent. Positive liberty is you're obligated to do things for other people. Well, what I would argue is that the problem that I see with this is that it's a conception of liberty that is rooted, that is not true, at least true to our lived experiences and to the sort of intellectual tradition of the West. Historically, beginning with Aristotle and going all the way through Christendom, is that liberty, properly understood, is being able to act within accordance to one's nature. And one was free when one acted in accordance with one's nature. So the laws, that was the whole debate of what the good state was. So whether it was Plato's The Republic, or Aristotle's The Politics, or Cicero's The Republic, the question is, what are the kinds of legal regimes we can set up that would reward virtuous behavior, penalize vicious behavior, and narrow the range of human action such that human flourishing, maximizing actions are given the greatest possible scope rather than vicious actions, whereas negative liberty would seem to indicate that we should just expand individual choice as far as we can, as long as that individual choice doesn't directly or indirectly harm somebody else. And we can get to the harm principle there, but I think also the definition of harm is somewhat flawed.
Okay, but what was your criticism?
Well, that was the criticism. I mean, this is a notion of liberty that is sort of not true to lived experiences and to how Westerners have viewed liberty since at least the ancient Greeks.
So can you give me an example of liberty that you don't like?
Maximizing individual choice is not the prerequisite for liberty. It's just
give me something concrete. Like what choice?
What would be the kind of liberty that I would like? Well,
no,
for
that
instance,
you wouldn't like. No. So give me a choice that an individual makes that you don't think it should be up to them.
Well, for instance, I think certain sexual preferences shouldn't be up to individual choice.
So what would happen with the gay person?
There's a lot. Well, let's put it this way: in the United States, sodomy was outlawed in all 50 states, and nobody was too upset about it. Society worked pretty fine. No totalitarian goon squads, just America as usual, apple pie.
So gay people should go to jail.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a danger to society.
Okay, but when they come out of jail, if they're still gay, what happens?
Well, how did America deal with it before? This has already been dealt with.
Yeah, but I'm asking you now. Like, what would happen if a gay person is sent to jail?
Yeah.
And then they come back and they're still gay.
The point is this. We have don't ask, don't tell. That works for a long time.
All right. Okay. What if you have a son and he turns out to be gay?
Irrelevant.
No, it's a good question. He turns out to be gay, right? And you know he's going to be arrested.
Uh-huh.
And you're fine with that.
Will you denounce it to the police, or?
There's no need to denounce it. I would tell him
So you would collaborate with the crime?
No.
No.
Again, this has already been dealt with before in America. This is not. These are not hypotheticals.
There's a reason we don't deal with it now.
Oh my God.
The reason now because the communists have changed the Overton window.
Okay. Are you a gay person? Oh, hold on a bit. I assume you're not a gay person.
Look,
Okay.
we're talking.
No, listen a bit, right?
No.
Could you become a gay person if you wanted right now?
I could. I don't know why I would.
You could. I personally couldn't. Like I honestly find dicks revolting and disgusting, right? So
what do you mean by could? Do you mean could in the sense that I'm not biologically determined to not be such?
Could you like the same sex as you? Could you be attracted to the same sex you are?
Let me ask you this.
But the conditional is not clear, V. Are you asking if he would be punished if he was to do so?
No. My question is this, right? Because this is what I want to get to.
Take dicks.
No, my point is this, right? I couldn't become gay, right? If I want, you would pay me $1 million and say, can you find JF attractive? I would not be physically able to do this, right?
No, neither would I.
Which means, hold on a bit, right? Which means it's not a choice. It means that I can't choose between this, and you're going to punish people for something they don't choose to do. So if someone is born in a way that is illegal, he's always going to be in jail, no matter what. Even if you punish him and you send him to jail and then he comes out, he's still a gay person. He's still a faggot, right? So
but you would still recognize that even someone who's deeply attracted to dicks, they could still retain the behavior. They could still keep it in, you know?
I know.
Right?
This is asinine. I mean, if someone's still a murderer when they get out of prison, they're still a murderer. What do we do with them?
Well, no, because if okay, the purpose of a prison is to rehabilitate and also to punish, right? So when they come back legally, they've been rehabilitated, and in order to go to prison, he would have to be committing the crime again. But if you're saying we need to lock up gay people, right? You find someone that has gay magazines under his bed or whatnot, and then you go tell the police, so he gets arrested. When he comes out, he's still going to like men. And because he was in prison, I think he might actually enjoy that a little bit more. But anyway, another question, right? Is there any other liberties that you don't like individuals having?
Well, I got the question is, can you define? We're talking about rights and nature. So why do you think humans don't have a nature?
What do you mean?
Well, humans have a nature that, if they conform to, they flourish more greatly than if they didn't.
Well, I mean, there is a way of answering this, which is to say that it is natural for, let's say, 10% of people to be gay. Like I remember reading this thing by E.O. Wilson, where he was saying like there's an evolutionary basis for some people to have a same-sex preference because they're more productive citizens. You know, they spend more time gathering like fruits or whatever because they're not raising kids. So in any given society, it makes sense for some people to be like only brothers or only sisters as opposed to mothers or fathers. This is how E.O. Wilson, it's in a book called On Human Nature, which I'd recommend anyone watching. That was the best that was basically why I don't think homosexuality is an issue. Like we say, well, a certain distribution of people in any given society are going to be gay, so be it.
May I ask a question? Just for clarification. So Todd, you believe gay people should be in jail? Is that what I'm listening to?
What I'm saying is that the good towards which man's goals are directed should not be thwarted or hindered by people that act in ways that are contrary to that good.
So yes, we should arrest gay people. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's not the only way to deal with these issues. We could say, as we had before in the United States, that you don't go around in public doing these kinds of things that undermine the foundation of our civilization.
Well, like, okay, yeah, dudes are bagging each other.
I think
the mall, like, yeah, of course.
Hold on, I think America is a very weak civilization. If two gay people fucking is about to bring it down.
But that's not what brought it down. That's a symptom of a deeper malaise.
I mean, I'll just play devil's advocate here for the, like, say Iran, a country I know reasonably well. They have an Islamic fundamentalist government which stones gays to death for being gay. Okay, men and women are banned from holding hands in the street. Pornography is banned. Gambling is banned. Drink is banned. Do you think that in Iran there is no drink, drugs, gambling, gay people, pornography? In fact, they have an absolute epidemic of each and every single one of these things, because there's something called psychological reactance. The more you try to stop people doing something, the more they want to do it. And in the times I've been to Iran, I have never spent more time gambling, drinking, having women, try it on.
I'm having images in my head right now.
I thought you were going to add that with
the academic agent in a party in Iran.
And that's because it's illegal. It's all these like German cans of vodka with like and the German cans of vodka have like naked women with massive tits on the front. So it's interesting, and you're gambling with Ayatollah Khomeini.
But I don't understand how gay people will be the fall of America. Todd. Like, I mean, I don't mean, like, I don't get what making it illegal would help. You know what I mean? It would just
has gay people, yeah.
Well, okay. Let's first answer the academic agent's question.
Sure.
That's not on the surface of it a very convincing argument, because, for instance, yes, we have laws against stealing, against fraud, against killing people and as murder. But do we still have murderers, thieves, and of course we do. The point of these laws is not to prevent the behavior, but raise the opportunity cost of the behavior to the extent that it's minimal and not socially disruptive.
But what's the behavior like? I mean, I'm not gay, but what, like, gay people aren't like bugging me every day. I'm not like walking to the store. I'm like, oh, fucking gays all over me.
I guess you're not the Christians making the gay wedding cakes.
What do you mean?
We discussed that, and most of us.
But that's the point. That's part of what they're doing. They're using their political power. And notice they're not picking on Muslims or Sikhs or Jews. They don't go to a Jewish.
I agree with that, right?
But this is the point. Gay. Now, would you agree, V, that as the way the organized gay lobbies acting today is anti-liberal?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you see, they are acting as a very real threat to even your ideology.
But it's anti-liberal because they're insisting on positive liberty. And my contention is always that positive liberty is an idea that is always trendy on the left, and it almost always leads to witch hunts. It leads to tyranny, the rule of the mob, and that is why negative liberty and individual freedoms from the freedom of the individual from different things is the way to go. Because as soon as you start insisting on rights which give an obligation for somebody else to pay for someone else to do whatever, you get into the situation that we're seeing now. Like every single Twitter mob is an exercise of positive liberty. They did it in France, where they had after the French Revolution, they had the reign of terror. They did it in Russia after the Russian Revolution. There was the reign of terror, and you can get it on the right as well. Like you could argue like McCarthyism was a form of this. You could argue that Salem witch trials, same thing. I mean, it doesn't really matter where it's coming from. It's just that the mass exercise of positive liberty is a massive net negative for society. So
I really have to disagree strongly with that. I think the mass exercise of negative liberty is an incredibly dangerous and corruptive thing in society. I think that, for instance, a good example of where negative liberty should not be permitted is highly addictive drugs. I think that people should not have the freedom to get hooked on heroin.
No,
They simply shouldn't have the freedom to do that. And if we make the penalties draconian enough, they won't seek it out. I completely reject this fake psychology that you put forth, that if something is banned, that makes it far more attractive. I simply think that's not true.
Greg, the data does not bear this out, because you could get heroin legally over the counter in 1955, 1954. In Britain, the total number of heroin addicts at that time was, I think, something ridiculous. It was like 60 or something. Since it was has been made illegal, you look at the number of heroin addicts now, and crack whores and various different things. All of these things have gone through the roof since these things were.
I think that in 1954 or 55, Britain was what percentage white? I think part of drug problems are problems with large non-white populations in your country, which tend to be people who, no, that's why we have anti-drug laws in America. Because we had Chinamen who were addicted to opium, and blacks addicted to coke, and basically non-white
Let him finish the academic agent.
Preferences tend to get addicted to these drugs. I think that the explosion of drug problems in Britain probably has everything to do with the decline of Britain's white majority.
So in Russia, for instance, where you have the crocodile drug that literally eats through the skin and you get to see the bones of people showing.
Yeah.
Are they white peopling wrong, or why are they so addicted on this drug that I
think Russia is a sad case of a white society. It's the white third world, and I don't understand why all the pathologies of drug and alcohol abuse in that country. It's a very sad thing. It should definitely be cracked down upon. I think paternalism works.
No,
okay, but you just said cracking down, and it doesn't help.
Like
Greg, hold on.
Worked very, very well. In fact,
come in on something important here.
Now, let me finish. Okay, all the evidence indicates that the prohibition movement and prohibition laws in the United States worked extremely well at attaining the goals that they wanted to attain, namely lowering the amount of overwhelming, horrible abuse of alcohol. And in fact, alcohol pathologies did not equal the level that they did before prohibition until the 1970s. It was so effective at knocking back alcohol-related social pathologies that even after it was abolished, it took decades before the society could decline back to the level that it was at before prohibition was instituted. So I think that that's a very good example of how prohibition of drugs, paternalism, can work. And I think that we should be definitely pro-paternalism, because really when people get addicted to alcohol and drugs, they lose their freedom. They become slaves to the needle, slaves to their...
So you would ban alcohol in your favorite society?
Yeah, I would be a pro.
Can I push back a bit on this utter bollocks that Greg is talking here? So first of all, this idea that the increase of non-whites has any bearing at all on the amount of, say, drug addiction is complete. I mean, a complete fabrication.
Do you think that Jamaicans coming to your country have nothing to do with the increased amount of
just to be fair, academic
in your country?
When you're speaking, Greg,
be real.
Let's hear academic.
Okay. All right, let's hear academic.
So if you go to places in this country which have been, ravaged by drug epidemics, it is places like Glasgow. If you watch that film Trainspotting, none of them are black. If you go to Glasgow, it's not got a particularly big non-white population. The valleys of Wales, it's the former industrial areas in the UK, which have become addicted to welfare and
opiates. We have the same problem in deindustrialized districts of America as well. So it's not just race, but it has to do with these are the products of social policies that have been instituted since the Second World War, deindustrialization being one, and pausing our countries with non-white immigrants being another.
But the second point about prohibition is, I mean, demonstrably false. All that happened.
No, it's not. It's demonstrably true.
Hey, let him finish.
Well, hold on. I mean, you
So
don't.
why is it false, academic agent?
Well, because you immediately got the moonshine and you essentially just gave the distribution of liquor into the hands of the mafia. That's all that happened in the 1930s. I mean, prohibition was a demonstrable failure, and it's ridiculous to have anybody defending that as a policy. It's failed wherever it's been tried.
But
because
do you think that social discourse, social pressure, and let's say a kind of religious environment can incite people not to do some actions?
Oh, absolutely. The idea you can police it socially, like the idea of, say, social shame. Like, I'm sure that the reason that drug use was a lot lower in the 1950s in Britain is because it was a lot more religious society and people had like basic respect for each other, and that some of these things have declined as the left has steadily undermined various different cultural norms over the decades. But the idea that trying to stop it by force, I mean, William Shakespeare wrote a play called Measure for Measure, where the guy in Measure for Measure, he tries to ban prostitution, and it just doesn't work. Like, even in that, the guy is like, "What, you're going to arrest us all? You think?" And the other thing he tries to do is he tries to stop men and women having sex before marriage, and basically, like, he has to start arresting and killing people for having sex just because they're trying to sleep with their boyfriend and girlfriend, their girlfriend or their fiance, and it doesn't work. I mean,
I have a question for Greg though. In Eastern Europe, drinking is a national culture, right? So if you're trying to ban alcohol here, you would have men on the streets. I believe in Russia, for instance, any president who fucked with the prices of vodka, in 2 years he was taken down. But even in Eastern Europe, right? So what would you do when you ban alcohol and you have angry people on the streets rioting and coming for the government? What would you do to them?
Well, first of all, I just don't think there's much hope in prying Slavic fingers and Eastern European fingers off.
Romania is not Slavic.
I know. That's why I said Eastern European fingers off of liquor bottles, because I've traveled in that part of Europe and I see the massive amount of alcohol use, and I wouldn't even try it there. But within the United States, we had a very successful movement to decrease alcohol problems, and it was very successful. It dramatically decreased it. Yes, indeed, it changed legal alcohol distribution to illegal alcohol.
I support that shit, because then Americans will come to Europe, and that's more tourism for us. So I vote Greg for president.
Okay, fine. You want to do that?
Really want Greg's opinions of the United States to be applied, and I want to see it. And not only that, maybe I can come with a few friends over there and sell some alcohol under the table. I'm really
no. We have the gibbet for that. I'm afraid that would be discouraged. But I want to deal, I guess, more with the greater fundamental philosophical question about positive and negative liberty, because. And I think the great text for this really is Plato's dialogue, the Gorgias. And in that dialogue, Socrates says, look, freedom is getting what you really want, doing what you want to do. But what do we really want to do? Well, we want to be self-actualized. And therefore, you can raise the question, well, if a particular choice that we make does not lead to our self-actualization, but to the opposite, is that a really free choice? Doing whatever you think you want is not necessarily doing what you really want. And
but who decides between the choices that are good and bad?
But and if it's possible for you to be mistaken about the things that are good for you, the things that are conducive to your self-actualization, and that's what freedom really is pursuing happiness, self-actualization, and you could be wrong about that, then it is possible for people to force you to be free. That's the conclusion that Rousseau draws from these premises. Because
this
if you make wrong decisions and lose your freedom by becoming a drug addict or a gambling addict or whatever, and somebody forces you to stop and nudges you with a gun at your back, if need be, back on the path to self-actualization, that is actually making you freer. And I think that is an ironclad.
I see where you're getting, right? But who gets to make the choices, which is bad and which is good?
Exactly.
Wiser people than you.
No,
All right. Hold on, right?
Oh, yeah,
there's Islamic scholars that would consider themselves much wiser than me. And he would say that women who go around undressed without the burqa, they need to be flogged, right? So it's for the good of society, because it's for the good of men. They don't look at women, right? They don't sin. And women don't get raped, right? So they're wiser men than me. So I guess I need to shut the fuck up. And if I complain, they will put the gun at my back. How do you talk against this in principle, right? They're wiser men than me, and they said that I need to comply.
First of all, they're not wiser than you.
Who decides then? Who decides who is a wise man and who isn't?
There are matters of fact, okay, that you can appeal to. Drug addiction does undermine your freedom and your ability to have an actualized existence. That's simply a matter of fact. And if people refuse to understand that and accept that, I see no reason why a responsible state or a responsible parent or somebody who cares about you.
I agree when it comes to drugs, right? You can show demonstrable fact that, for instance, drugs are bad, unless you're talking about marijuana, for instance. And I, as a doctor, I'm telling you it's fine. But there are going to be, like, if this is the way you want to rule society, wise people, quote unquote, that you haven't defined, are just going to say what's good and bad. I'm sorry, but that's too arbitrary for my liking. I don't think this is the role.
The whole point is that it's not arbitrary, because if it can be based upon facts which are observable and objective, it's not arbitrary. And don't we all want to be governed by people who are on average better than us, smarter than us, wiser than us, more?
Excuse me, can I interject here? There's something that's kind of being missed. Yeah. Okay, this is good. This is the kind of talk we need to have. But I have to object to your earlier claim, academic agent, that positive liberty is a left-wing view. The idea that we have positive obligations to one another is the original view the West had. Aristotle talks about it, Plato talks about it, and the Christian religious tradition, we talk about it. All of these things are embedded in the Western tradition from the very beginning. What makes Rousseau, I think, particularly creepy when he says forced to be free, the leftist view of universals, of course, the problems of universals that arose in the Middle Ages, has largely accepted nominalism, the idea that universals don't exist. And so what really Rousseau is telling you he's going to force you to conform to nothing, which is obviously impossible. But Aristotle and the various Western tradition, both classical and Christian, have a variety of ways of handling that. And those kinds of pathologies of the left-wing counterproductiveness aren't really the case. I mean, let's put it in perspective here. The classical Christian context of what we would call today, I guess, positive liberty, I think it's anachronistic, gave rise to the greatest civilizations in history. And let me give you an example. The idea of hospitals, in the modern sense of a hospital, develops really only after Constantine. Because while there were certainly hospitals for legionnaires, there were hospitals for the emperor, these were sort of specialty for the uber rich. Only after we had this Christian notion that we are our brother's keeper did we have this widespread imposition of hospitals on the world. And not only that, prior to Christianity, the idea of treatment was largely just isolating them in containment zones. But people started doing in the 4th and 5th centuries in an organized way, what they'd done in the 2nd and 3rd centuries in an unorganized way, is take more proactive measures to improve the health of the individual.
Okay, so one of the things I mean, there's a lot of things I want to say, and in fact, I mean, coming back to the whole liberalist thing, at some point in this stream, I want to lay out a kind of framework for us all to be able to think about some of these issues. But before I get to that, I think one of the issues that we're coming up with here is a long-standing conflict, essentially, between Plato and Aristotle. You know, these guys are talking basically about philosopher kings. like taking, you know, a wise man taking decisions on behalf of everyone else for the betterment of everyone else. And this is basically what I'd call Platonist rationalism, which then basically feeds into left-wing thinking down the line, as against Aristotelian empiricism, which I think is a lot less pushy about, you know, trying to create its utopia. And I mean, I don't know if we want to get into this now, but I really think that in a lot of these conversations that we're having at the moment, you know, around the internet, you hear all these terms like rational, skeptic, classical liberal, and you know, all of these different terms cause a lot of confusion. And I think we actually have to go back to first principles. I mean, it's good that we're having like these really fundamental conversations. There was a book written in 1987 by Thomas Sowell called A Conflict of Visions, which I think really distills primary philosophical and political conflicts that we have really well. And this basically comes down to what he calls the constrained or the tragic vision versus the unconstrained or the utopian vision. In the first, human nature is seen as fundamentally flawed and unfixable. That is, we are selfish, we are self-interested, we are greedy. There's nothing we can do about that. And the true source of evil is in men's hearts. So in that view, we should concentrate on incentives to try to basically funnel our nature in positive ways. For example, you know, harsh punishments for crime to disincentivize people from doing crime, for example. This is the logic of like Machiavelli, Hobbes, Edmund Burke, David Hume. You can see it in guys like John Adams, Alexander Hamilton, Adam Smith, basically all the free market economists, but especially F.A. Hayek, Ludwig von Mises, and Milton Friedman. This is the kind of the tragic vision, as against the unconstrained or the utopian vision, which says that there's no fixed human nature, that mankind is seen as being perfectible. And this appeals to blank slate or tabula rasa. And in this analysis, the problem isn't our nature, it's the bad old institutions. If only we could change those institutions, we could change society, and all those problems will go away. And this is the logic of the old Soviet Union. You know, if you engineer society in such and such a way, then the self-interest and the greed will simply vanish. And that logic is there in people like Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine, utilitarians like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, the Marxists, of course, and basically all of the modern progressive left, including all socialists, feminists, and of course SJWs. But related to those two things, there's another key dispute, and I think we're hitting on it here, okay? And that is the difference between what philosophers have called spontaneous order versus rational central planning, okay? Now, the most famous example of spontaneous order is probably Adam Smith's invisible hand. You know, nobody needs to design the markets. You know, the markets spontaneously produce more product at better prices. Classic example is the baker, funny enough. You know, he does not bake the bread for you out of the goodness of his heart, but to make profit. And as a byproduct of his self-interest, more people get more bread at a better price, and nobody planned this. But it's not just markets, but all of society and ultimately social order itself and the state. You can see that idea in Machiavelli, you can see it in Hobbes. Ultimately, you can see this idea in Charles Darwin's evolution. You know, nobody designed nature. It only seems balanced, but it's a spontaneous order. This whole idea that human society doesn't just come to be overnight. You know, it's the result of billions of individual decisions over centuries, which developed organically, incrementally over time. And it's a bottom-up way of seeing humanity, almost like one big organism. And I would say that this whole way of seeing things is the heart of empiricism. And against all of this is the Enlightenment idea that we can plan society rationally like engineers. This is the utilitarian model. And when people talk about rationalism in political theory, this is what it is, okay? The word rational sounds cool because people on the internet like to use it, and you know, everybody wants to think of themselves as rational. But very often, rationalism has not been a particularly cool thing in history. Basically, all of socialism is a form of rationalism. These ridiculous kind of philosopher king things that Greg is giving us is a strange form of rationalism. The idea that we can plan society from the top down, and some philosopher king is going to tell us what to do for the betterment of everyone else. And then the final,
Were you done?
Hold on. There's one last thing.
Jesus fucking Christ.
No, it's too long, academic agent. So your last thing, you keep it for later. I want to address some points here because you come up with the idea of central planning, and Greg on the chat is asking, did anyone suggest central planning? Well, somehow, Greg, it is my impression that you proposed a form of paternalism as far as drugs goes. At least you suggested that there could be people with the truth or with some truth, and that we should allow these people to impose their beliefs on others. Wasn't it what you proposed when talking about drugs?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's very different from the idea that we can have some sort of centrally controlled economy. This is a completely different issue. I think it's a complete side issue. And I think that it's a waste of time to go down that path. Everybody wants the people in government to be, on average, smarter than they are, wiser than they are, more ethical than they are. We all do that. We all want that. And it is possible for people in government to actually be better than the average person in society.
But
and it's possible for
can I ask one thing, dude?
Wise laws that actually improve the overall goodness of society. And we have a long history of that. Because with the bad governments that we've... Hey, just let me just finish.
They don't want to ban alcohol because the wise men realize that by banning alcohol, they will get a social uprising.
I'm sure that's true in Romania. Didn't actually work out so badly in the United States, but there are differences of culture.
How was it successful? How was prohibition successful?
It reduced the amount of death by cirrhosis of the liver. The numbers of people who were committed to mental institutions, to madhouses because of alcohol-induced psychosis.
What about the death by the mafia, mate? It brought the mafia. Like, you're not going to...
But wait a sec. Even when you factor all that in, it still led to a net drop in violent crime because there were fewer people drinking and committing.
And it's also because the organized crime beat the smaller criminals, mate.
Even with the organized crime thing.
If you have the mafia running in a sector, right, you're going to extort the businesses, and eventually the business owners are just going to pay up, and that's not a violent crime anymore. They don't have to come with the baseball bat to wreck down the shop every time. Once is enough.
You've switched topics here. You've switched topics from the mafia distributing liquor to the mafia shaking down people for protection. Those are different things.
Yeah, they're not violent crimes. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you have
guys,
hang on. I want to ask a question, Greg. I don't think most people don't want to live in a society where the government's like, no, you can't have a beer or a joint. I know better than you. Or like, don't gamble. I'm 30 years old. I'm a big boy. I could choose to get fucking hammered one night and be a fucking asshole to people, or I could choose to gamble my shit away. That's what the idea of being free in society is supposed to be. Because then, like JF was saying, what if someone in government, they start with banning weed, banning alcohol, banning whatever, and then one day they're like, okay, we're gonna ban porn. And then everyone's just like, no, like, I want to fucking jerk off the porn, it's that slippery slope when someone who thinks they know better will start banning things that
I would ban.
Drinking alcohol is not healthy.
I would ban porn tomorrow. I would ban porn completely.
You fucking animal.
I would ban porn tomorrow.
What? The stream is going wild. He said he was gonna ban porn.
Yeah. I would ban porn tomorrow.
Don't remove the porn, sir. Don't remove the porn.
There's a point of clarification that needs to be made here. And Greg Johnson is getting at a very good point here, okay? When the liberals / libertarians / the modern left say that rights are, as long as you don't hurt somebody else, you can do whatever you want. What they have is a radically defective and minimal view of hurt. To say that a compulsive alcoholic father who beats his wife, spends all of his money on alcohol rather than raising his children, and his children to resort to prostitution to make money, the fact that there's no recourse for those people socially or legally is a radically defective outlook on reality. And
You have child protection services, though.
I
have one question because this is really important. Just one question. Would you ban video games as well?
That's just an irrelevant question. Back to the point.
I have a fundamental question.
Yeah.
What will be the driving force allowing you to impede on people's liberty? I'm a libertarian, and so I even have difficulty saying that we should disallow heroin, for example. Even if I know it's bad, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. I don't see how I could tell to another human being, I'm going to stop you from producing your heroin and consuming it. What will be the criteria by which you will justify that an intervention on someone's liberty is good for them? Will it be well-being? Will it be happiness? Will it be number of babies produced?
Are you asking this to me or to Greg or to both of us?
I'm asking to Todd first and then Craig.
Okay. I think in some sense, Greg and I would have a slightly similar response in that when the collective steps in to restrict individual rights would be when once we understand, I think Aristotle's a good sort of middle ground to start with. There's certain vices and virtues that hinder or help human flourishing. Now, to the extent that one indulges in the vice, to the extent of how potent the vice is, some vices are more dangerous than others. But the point is, though, when those, so how and why, the means, and then the why. So basically, if you perform vicious activity that is socially destructive to the point where society ceases to function very well, then that would be grounds for such an intervention.
But Todd, what if we're in a society where there's 95% of the people who find that your religion is disruptive? That you just being a Catholic or whatever you are is disruptive to them, and they go insane and they're like, oh, Todd is a fucking idiot. He drives me crazy for having his religion. You cannot base the invasions of personal liberty based on how annoyed people are around you.
No, it's not about annoyance. That right there is a purely arbitrary criteria. The criteria that I'm appealing to is the understandings of human nature through Aristotelian realism. And once you look at Aristotelian realism and what it says about the flourishing of human nature, you can then craft laws around that, where laws that encourage virtue or pass. Now, hold on a second. This gets to the enforcement mechanism. That
hey Todd, sorry, are you like looking away from your mic every 3.5 seconds?
Yeah. Are you talking at
It
the mic like this?
No,
It's like, whoa.
The first comment is someone saying, I think he's spinning around on his chair.
Yeah.
You're like, no.
Somebody said that in a stream, on a Worski stream a while ago. But the means, yeah, this idea that traditional societies are somehow centrally planned communist societies is just historically.
I've got a really important
you guys
question
find
to ask
Saudi
here.
Arabia to be a desirable society? And I'm actually more curious about this to Greg. I mean, other than the Muslim religion, right? The fact that alcohol is banned, that drinking is banned, drugs are banned, porn is banned. Like, do you find this a society that you would consider positive?
Oh God, no! I'd hate to live amongst those goat fucking Arabs.
No, it's not the fact that they're goat fucking, right? No. Listen. Okay,
they don't ban goat fucking, isn't that?
Yeah, the Saudi. No. Listen, okay.
Beauty
the Saudi
contests
Arabian
for farm
system.
animals.
No, let me ask the question, please. Right?
Great
the Saudi
society.
Arabian system, the government applied to a white nation. Would you find that okay?
I don't know enough about it. Why don't we talk about European examples? Because we have lots of examples of that. And in fact, throughout most of European history, we've had public-spirited, decently paternalistic societies that have banned certain kinds of behaviors that have been determined to be harmful to the populace. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing. We don't need to look at anything exotic like Saudi Arabia.
You'd absolutely like it. They have wise people that decide for everyone else what's good and what's bad. The things you don't
disagree with that because I think they're a very backward society, a very alien society.
Yeah, I understand that. But it's the principles that you like.
Let me just identify something that I think is very interesting about liberals and libertarians. Whenever you talk about paternalism in the most sensible way, instead of looking at examples of this that have existed in exemplary societies like Great Britain or the United States or France, the acme of Western civilization, right? They immediately go to Orwell's fantasies in 1984, or something exotic like the Islamic Republic of Iran, or a place like Saudi Arabia. I think that is a ghastly form of reflexive straw manning that
I wouldn't like
takes
to live
place.
in medieval France, mate. Honestly, but I have another question.
How about 19th century France?
Before we move to V's question, I had asked a question. Todd gave an answer, and Greg has disconnected. So I'd like to have Greg's answer now concerning what will be your criteria for harmful or for bad or for good, because we're talking about having people decide for others. As a libertarian, I take issue because however you're going to define harmful is going to be an arbitrary criteria that you perceive that other might not perceive.
Also, in like a minute, I picked out the best super chats. Thank you everyone for donating. I didn't want to interrupt, so I'll do that when there's free time. So let me know when you're all good for like just a 2-minute break, so I can read them. Right,
yeah, and I think that when Todd spins around in his chair, he somehow interrupts my internet connection. It's a very strange thing that I've noticed happening every time. So Todd, if you could hold still for just a few minutes so I can get this out, I'd really appreciate it. The answer is this. The way that we're going to get to a society where paternalism is acceptable is we are going to have a change in our zeitgeist. We're going to have to fundamentally stop thinking in liberal terms and start thinking in other terms. And the other terms that we need to start thinking in are the terms that, well, Todd mentioned, classical Aristotelian philosophy. Aristotle was just as paternalistic as Plato, I'm afraid to say. He thought that the purpose of government was to promote virtue in the populace. And by virtue, he meant things that are connected with self-actualization. He didn't mean virtue as, say, a long list of revealed religious preferences or commandments and things like that. There was nothing like that. It was based on, ultimately, an understanding of what makes man flourish, what perfects human nature. And I think that just as we know empirically what makes our bodies healthy and ill, so too can we know what makes our souls healthy or sick. And that is really the realm in which virtue grows, the soul. When we talk about cultivating people, self-actualization and so forth, we're talking about the health of the soul. And so just as there are physicians of the body, there can be physicians of the soul. It can be just as empirical and objective as medicine. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't going to be controversies, right? I mean, medicine is full of controversies too, but there is a method, a scientific, empirical method for understanding what makes people flourish. And once we reorient conversations in society about what makes us flourish as human beings and get rid of all this abstract talk about valuing what individuals choose just because they choose it, then I think
is there anything you choose that would be banned, though? Is there anything you really like that would be banned in this new society you would create?
Is there anything that I really like that I would ban? Porn. I just love porn, and I would ban it tomorrow in a heartbeat.
So you would be okay with going to jail if you're watching?
No. It's a waste of time, and it's bad for you, and it's bad for your ability to relate to other people sexually.
I agree.
And we now have actual empirical evidence that it desensitizes people and makes it more difficult for people to
and rape is high in countries that ban porn, mate. There's also empirical evidence of that. Because when people don't jerk off,
it's already against the law.
Or you fuck goats.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, whether or not Greg Johnson likes the thing or not,
porn
does
is
not render the truth claim that it should be banned false.
Yeah, but he's trying to get, you're absolutely right, but he's trying to get to this preference thing, but the thing is that it doesn't matter what I like. It doesn't matter what we like.
No, it matters. You know why? You know why it matters, and it fucking matters. Because what you're advocating will hurt other people, right? It doesn't really hurt you because you don't drink, you don't gamble, you don't do any of these things, right? So it's easy to advocate for taking away other people's liberties when all you lose is your porn, which I'm pretty sure you'll find ways to jack off and find anyway. But this is the problem with people advocating for taking others' liberties, because they usually don't talk about taking their own liberties.
Yeah, well, I believe that when there have been times in my life when I behaved very foolishly, and I honestly wish that my parents had not been so damned liberal, and that they would have stepped in and rapped me on the head and shook me up and woke me up and got me on the right path. I actually wish that had happened. And you can't tell me that every one of us in this conversation and every one of you out there listening in the World Wide Web have not behaved in ways that were stupid and self-defeating, that in retrospect you wouldn't want to have done. And you can't also tell me that there weren't people at the time. Hey, let me finish. You can't tell me that there weren't people at the time who knew what you were doing, knew that it was wrong, knew that it was bad for you, and could have stopped you if only they'd been empowered to. That's what I want. I think we'd all be better off.
You need the nanny state, right? Because you didn't have parents when you grew up. You need the state to become your nanny. I understand, but other people don't have the same experience that you had.
I completely deny. I completely dismiss that claim. Every one of us were kids, and we were very lucky to have paternalistic parents when we were kids.
I want to say one thing, Greg.
We all act like kids as adults sometimes.
I'm
sorry.
No, like at your point with the whole porn thing, if you're doing it like morning, afternoon, evening, and you're letting it like take over your life, obviously it becomes a problem. There's that, ED, early ED for young people who just jerk off, and then when they actually go to fuck, they're so desensitized by porn and jerking off that it's hard for them to get erections. So there are problems out there, but I think that people like should just educate themselves on how to do things, at like a normal, healthier rate. Because like banning all porn, first of all, that's going to be impossible. Secondly, the riots that would happen.
I could just imagine these people going out there. Would they be so shameless?
I'd be number one
for porn.
Oh, I'd be number one. No Antifa mask or anything. But
I would also be there.
I have to pound.
So we'd have Andy on front of the people marching the streets for porn, and Greg Johnson supporting from this side as some sort of anonymous supporter of his movement. Maybe donating through super chats so that Andy can lead his movement.
No, but
now we're gonna take a break and we're gonna read the super chats. So you guys keep your IDs, and we're gonna go back to it in a few minutes. Andy, what do we have?
Yeah, I'm gonna pound through a few that we've seen. Thank you everyone for donating. It really helps. If you're enjoying the show, just hit like. It really supports. Malcolm from the North, what's up, buddy? $10. JF finally caught himself a fucking light. Fully became the Chad JF instead of the Chud JF. Cheers to all of you on today's show. Thank you. Rannon Wheeler, $50. Thank you very much, man. Longtime viewer. I used to be a leftist progressive. I happened by your beautiful face, and I was like, I'm going to destroy this guy. But I listened to the video to write my script, and I got 2 words the whole way. It was, I agree. Thank you. And then early on, when we were talking about the cake thing, which we did get off base a little bit, Braving Ruin just was like, you should probably change your title. Fam, $10. What if I really fucking hate black and disabled people and refuse to bake cakes for them? I think everyone here agreed pretty much that like you should be able to sell to who you'd like to sell. Was almost pretty much what we all had. Pragmatic Culture, 1488. Academic Agent is somehow a leftist libertarian socially, but a lulbert economically. The worst of both worlds, in my opinion. Academic, do you have a response to that?
I mean, the laws of economics don't change, and I believe in them. So I don't know what he's on about. Ridiculous comment.
Yeah, sometimes I just have to read the ones that just come up. Sometimes they're.
Oh, Andy, we have a super chat from Malcolm from the North, $2 Canadian, who renames you Andy Pornsky, leading the Pornhub marches of 2018. Are you happy that you're not Andy Race-Warsky anymore?
No. It could be Andy Race-Pornsky. How about just both? Circuit Quiet, $5. Homosexuals are massively represented perpetrating child molestation. Is that true? That the gay people are more child molesty than non?
I don't know about it. I've heard that a lot, but I haven't watched the evidence.
I think there is a culture in men going below the legal age limit. But you got to remember that the legal age limit is not what we'd call natural law. It's just a social convention. So there's different ways to argue that.
All right. Fast to Stampede, $10. Homosexuality is being forced into the public. It stifles male bonds and female bonds by sexualizing them. Also, I prefer a society where hard drugs aren't sold at the corner store. Malcolm from the North, $5. Again, Greg must be Jeff Sessions' homeboy to spew such nonsense about drug prohibition. Was that? Yeah. Do you have a response to that, Greg? No, all right.
No, I have no response. Right. Just ZZZ snoring sound.
All right.
Yeah. I'm so bored with potheads. They really are oven worthy.
Sounds good. Babo, $10. What's up, Babo? If you don't think homosexuality is a good thing, then why are you trying to force people with a genetic a predilection for it to reproduce? Won't this?
Yeah, that's a good question. As an evolutionary biologist, I say the best thing you want to do if you want homosexuality out is allow them to marry, and they will not have children, and you will get rid of the homosexuality genes within a few generations. If you force them to live with women and make babies, you're gonna have the genes surviving.
Interesting. Ercada, $10. Should we bring back pre-Christian Europe or religions into one super religion in order to reunite the white race? Anyone?
I think gay is a recessive gene, mate, because otherwise you wouldn't have homosexuals at all.
All right. Larry Steele, $5. The fact that people are scared of the porn being banned really proves the point, you shitty addicts. Look, I used to be more of an addict when I was younger, but now I use my porn, responsibly. But I don't think we should born naked bodies. Like, that's sort of silly to me. Though people might take it beyond, like those fleshlight machines with the VR headsets that the Japanese are making now. I mean, I'm not saying I don't want to buy one of those things, but I can see
it is so fucking awesome.
Yeah, Mark Rubio, $10. People were asking me to actually read this one in particular. Let's dispel once and for all with this fiction that Barack Obama doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. Barack Obama is undertaking a systematic effort to change this country. Does anyone know anything?
This was a chat from 2002. We are sorry. It arrived late to the Warski Live show. YouTube has some latency issues. I apologize.
Yeah, I was like, am I missing? Like, why are people asking me to read this? And last one for now. Thank you everyone who's donating. I'll keep collecting some more. Braving Ruin. He said, pretty off from the weeds from Bake the Cake here. You are very right. But sometimes shit fucking hits the fan and we discuss other things. And thank you everyone. And remember, hit like if you're enjoying. And let us continue. What were you saying before?
We were talking. Yeah, go ahead, academic agent.
So I had two questions I wanted to ask. One for Todd, one for Greg. I was accused of straw manning earlier on when I talked about central planning, but I'd like to know in what ways is Greg proposing something that is any different from literally Stalin? I mean, how is the state that is basically forcing me not to watch porn and basically in these terms moral fagging all over the place?
Wasn't that a question for me? In the comments you said it was for me. Oh, you said Todd and Andy.
No, so that was the question for Greg, and I'll ask you the question, Todd, as well. You mentioned something at one point about human flourishing, and my question is, and I think Aristotle would probably agree, if you do not have moral agency and free will, how can human beings flourish? Because I think most people would agree that the biggest thing that humans need for flourishing is some degree of liberty and being able to choose. Like, everybody's probably watched Clockwork Orange. That's a Catholic novel by Anthony Burgess, and it's all about, like, if you take away free will from people to be able to commit good or evil, morality itself stops. Because generally I'm up for virtue ethics. Like I quite like Thomas Aquinas, okay, but it only virtue ethics only makes sense if you have the liberty, if you have the freedom to be able to make good moral decisions. If some twat is telling me what to do all the time, that's not moral at all. That's just coercion. And
P.S. I wasn't twirling around, Greg.
Those are the two. So those are the two questions. So, Greg, how are you not like Stalin? And Todd, isn't the basic precondition for all virtues moral agency or freedom? So those are the two. I don't know if they want to respond.
Yeah, I'll
Starting
respond.
with Todd.
Greg, do you want to go first?
No, I don't want to respond to that question.
Okay, I'll respond.
Hold on, Stalin. I mean, that's what Stalin would say. You just have me shot out the back. I want you to explain how your journalism is not like Stalin. It's really.
I think that's an incredibly childish, infantile, stupid straw man question, and I'm not going to answer it. You're going to have to come up with something more impressive if you're going to get me to talk.
All right, I will take my job as a co-host and reformulate the question in a polite manner. So, Greg, what do you advocate for state-imposed morality, or do you think that it could pass through the culture of father and mother teaching stuff to their children? Because that's two very different ways of implementing any form of paternalism. Do you advocate for state invasions of private liberties?
Yes, because adults all sometimes act like children. And in circumstances where adults are acting like children, it seems like we all want somebody to intervene, to put us on the right path, to save us from the consequences of our stupid decisions. We all need state intervention by wiser, more caring people to save us from the consequences of stupid decisions. And that's why state paternalism is a good thing. It's a good thing because it makes us freer if you understand freedom as getting what you really want, which is to lead a good life.
Can I ask you another question? This is really important.
I'm completely bewildered that because you can't help yourself from watching porn, you want a totalitarian dictatorship from forbidding you to do that. That is like
anything about a totalitarian dictatorship.
Because what you're
straw man. This is the straw man that
it's not. You're asking for it and you don't know
block.
Okay, if someone's smarter than you,
as if we haven't had paternalistic governments that weren't totalitarian dictatorships.
Hold on.
I can't believe our whole political discussion has started with Greg tonight wondering if he should watch porn. And here we are remaking the whole philosophy.
I want somebody to stop me.
There's a really
question that was posed to me.
Yeah. So now Todd can answer on the question of academic agent.
Right.
Okay. Well, there's two things I want to add. I'll first answer with the question he asked me. Yes, a certain level of moral agency and free will is required. But by the same token, we should legalize theft, murder, and rape, because unless we have the state to step in to tell people what to do, they're not going to have the free choice to voluntarily choose to be a good boy. Now, the other thing I want to answer is this thing about Stalin. Well, let me think. 1960 America. Pretty much everything that we've been talking about banning except for alcohol was banned. And if you go back to 1920s America, then everything we're talking about was banned. And America was not a Soviet state. In fact, last I checked, we were the bastion of the free world against Soviet communism from 1920 to 1960. And lastly, the idea about father-mother paternalism in the state. See, that's the problem. As Aristotle pointed out in the Politics, the state is a natural social evolution of the family. So it isn't even a clear distinction to be made in the first place.
Okay, I've got a real practical question to ask here, okay? Because you talked about like knowing things, like we know all sorts of things are good for us, okay? Like I know it is better for me to eat like chicken salad than it is to eat like McDonald's Big Mac, okay? I know it is good to work out in the gym and spend lots of time there. as opposed to sitting on my ass making YouTube videos all day, okay, or playing video games and wanking, okay. But I have the freedom to make those choices, and I'm flawed as a human being, and I don't always choose to go to the gym or eat the chicken salad. Sometimes I choose to, eat McDonald's, make YouTube videos, and wank to cuckold porn. Okay. Now, I guess my question is, where do you draw the line? So, are you going to have, in your paternalistic world, are you also going to be forcing me to go to the gym? Are you going to be forcing me to eat chicken salad? Or is it only these things, only these particular issues around, for some reason, homosexuality and porn that you have a particular hang up with? Or are you actually going to be organizing all parts of my life, like these other areas that we know are definitely, it's definitely more virtuous to work out, right, than to not work out. So where do you draw the line?
Okay, first short answer is that the idea that people dying of, alcohol poisoning or dying from these sexually transmitted diseases is anything remote to any social dysfunction that's related to not working out is just patently absurd. And second of all, how America did it in 1920. What I'm wanting to hear here is how 1920s America was the Soviet police state with jackbooted thugs doing all these terrible things that that Greg and I are constantly bombarded with. The fact is, this was the center of the free world as you would have understood it. This is
Todd,
historical facts.
I think you're mischaracterizing the difference between good nutrition and exercise and sexual disorders, because right now, sodium is killing much more people than AIDS in America. So it seems that if you go solely by the facts of the well-being, you would be much more investing your time much better if you were to police people on how much salt they eat every day than police them on sexual behavior. So it seems that you're not that much motivated by the factual medical well-being of people. It seems that you have something about sexual behavior.
Let me respond to this. The problem with that, JF, is that if the amount of medical research that has been invested to cure STDs were invested to be a quick fix for obesity, obesity wouldn't be a problem. See, people aren't forced to bear the consequences of their
No, that's not it. No, I'm sorry.
Okay,
you haven't answered the question.
Obesity will always be a problem. I did
answer the question. The question is clear: is that these before we had sophisticated antibiotics, the sort of AIDS epidemic that was spreading due to homosexual activity was just horribly destructive of society. But now we have, government mandated healthcare and cheap healthcare for all these people, so they don't have to pay the cost.
Hold on. What does antibiotics have to do with AIDS?
Because the problem is well-being. JF was saying that mortality.
AIDS is a virus. Antibiotics are for microbes. Why?
But modern medicine, let's just rephrase it in modern medicine, has negated these negative health consequences. And I suppose if we continue to have modern medicine applied to obesity, which they seem to be doing now, so it's not comparing, it's comparing apples and oranges.
People get obese because they eat greasy foods, because they don't work out, because if you have a lifestyle where you go to the office and then you go to the car and then you come home and you sit at the computer, and people also get obesity because, for instance, they can't afford to purchase expensive meat, so they will buy sausages and other things that are filled with greasy foods, but they're cheap and easy to digest. Plus the fast food, and plus certain genetic illnesses like diabetes and, for instance, thyroid problems. That's why you get obesity.
But it is.
We're not talking about obesity. No, I'm not talking about the fact that people are obese. We're talking about the negative health factors.
How can you cure obesity? Like that is
no,
like.
We're not talking. This is straw manning. I'm talking. JF asked me a very specific question.
Todd, it seems to me that you're saying that the cardinal sin, the cardinal vice of gluttony is now allowed because modern healthcare can somehow give people like a liposuction and deal with obesity. I'm asking, why aren't you forcing me to go to the gym and eat chicken salad as opposed to McDonald's on the same basis that you're banning my porn? It's exactly the same thing. It's just a different vice. And I want to know, why aren't you doing that to me? Maybe Greg would. I mean,
I would. I actually wrote an essay called "How About Fascist Medicine?" And I do think that a paternalistic state should encourage people to eat well and have healthy habits. And I think that that should start in public education, and it should be encouraged through adulthood. And if people fall off the wagon and get fat, they should be forced to bear the full consequences of getting fat. One of the reasons why there is such an antipathy on the part of healthy people to socialized medicine is healthy people don't want to pay for the angioplasty of lard asses. They don't want to do that. They take care of their health, and they don't want to be subsidizing the hemorrhoids and the heart disease of people who don't. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. And so one of the things I propose is that we really do need to make people jog for the master race, as the Dead Kennedys song.
So wait, do that like literally by gunpoint, like jog for Stalin?
Yeah, jog for Stalin. That's right. No, seriously though, we do need to incentivize health, and we need to start by giving people good habits, because virtue ethics is a great thing.
Do you shut down McDonald's? Do you shut down McDonald's?
I would make corn syrup more expensive than caviar. I would tax that stuff to the point where no one would ever want
How is this
to
not
use it.
But this is central planning. Yeah, this is my point. You said you.
No, that's straw man. No, you can't call a spade a spade. That's a straw man.
I mean, this is central planning. You are trying to socially engineer society, like a.
I'm trying to socially engineer society. Central planning means that the government is the sole producer and employer of everyone.
You said you want to tax corn syrup so that people don't get fat. That
doesn't mean that I believe that the government should be the one who produces and distributes all goods. That's central planning. That's the straw man that you guys are running towards.
You're taxing corn syrup isn't because of an economic reason. You're taxing it so people don't buy it. That is central planning, mate.
You want to call that central planning? I just call it paternalism, and it exists in societies that do not have socialist central planning. So somehow we've managed to have cigarette taxes and alcohol taxes in America without socialist central.
In this country, in the UK, we had a socialist government under a prime minister called Clement Attlee, and it was literally this kind of Christian paternalist Fabian society bullshit. It was exactly this. I mean, it wasn't like Marxist socialism. It was this kind of Christian form of, trying to engineer better outcomes, and it was a fucking disaster economically and all the rest of it. Because it doesn't matter if you're Christians, Muslims, communists, or anything else. You cannot control supply and demand in this way. It just doesn't it always leads.
And not only
that is just simply not true.
We do tax cigarettes and other things because they're called vices, so it's a vice tax, right? It's like a luxury. Yeah. But you don't tax syrup because it gets people fat. That is the difference between a vice tax and central planning, mate.
That's a distinction without a difference, I'm afraid. No, I think that we should have vice taxes for things like sugary sodas and so forth. That would be good and we should take that money and we should use it for healthcare for fat people, so that they subsidize their own healthcare.
And no, I'm not.
How about Greg? How about just making a healthier food, organic food, all that more affordable? Because if you were to shop at a place like Whole Foods that has organic food and better food, everything is priced up to a point where it's almost like unnecessary, not worth it for people to purchase. So would you be opposed to just making healthier food more affordable and then keeping corn syrup and all that stuff the way it is right now?
No, I would definitely put excise, sin taxes, vice taxes, whatever you want to call them, on things like corn syrup.
But why? I mean, why do you think?
Curious. People in the chat who wants to live in Greg's utopia, press 1.
Well, here's what I'd like to know.
Come on, let's not appeal to the popularity.
I would like an explanation of how the centrally planned, quote-unquote, WASP Puritan United States went from a frontier society in 1620 to put a man on the moon. I thought this stuff fails overnight.
Well, it's not central planning. The reason that the United States did well is because it always protected property rights. It gave people. I mean, you can go back to Jamestown. They tried doing it by the whip, it failed. They almost all died, and then they gave people individual parts of land, and now the farmers were incentivized because they were working for themselves, and the society flourished. I'd recommend a book called Why Nations Fail. And nations fail for instituting the sorts of policies that Greg wants to implement. And it doesn't matter what you call it. There is only basically inclusive institutions and inclusive societies that give people the freedom to flourish, or there are extractive, totalitarian ones that shut all of that stuff down, and they all fail.
That's just nonsense. That's historically speaking nonsense.
It's not nonsense.
No, it is. From the beginning of this country.
It's libertarian nonsense.
Yeah.
On stilts.
From the beginning of this country until 1960, all of these sexual things that Greg and I are talking about were banned. And guess what? We were the center of the free world. We put a man on the moon. I'm trying.
Why did they stop being banned? What made it so that
communism? The whole communist takeover the academy.
What was the Communist Party of America that took over the United States, and when did that happen?
So do you believe in cultural Marxism, V?
I do believe in cultural Marxism.
Exactly, those guys.
Okay, why did those guys get traction?
That's kind of irrelevant why they got traction.
No, it's not irrelevant. It's very relevant, because if you wouldn't have banned these things, they wouldn't have talking points in order to mobilize people and push their agendas. That's why.
Okay, then why did they only do that in the 1960s and not for the previous 300 years of the U.S. country?
Well, when was cultural Marxism invented? Well, not invented,
no, but that's the point. There were no substantial critics of this regime that Greg and I are advocating until the 1960s. The very
Your regime used, because of its irrational bannings on things, which I'm sure you consider rational, allowed the cultural Marxists to take advantage of. Because if I would live in a country where alcohol is banned, but everywhere in the world is not, then yeah, when a cultural Marxist come along and say, you know, if you advocate with me, I'll give you back alcohol, a lot of people are going to be tempted to do that.
Well, here's my question. Why is it that every time we get a gain in, quote, my liberal rights, the cultural Marxists get more power? Are the cultural Marxists more powerful now or in 1920?
How many videos do I have against cultural Marxists on my channel versus how many do you have?
I mean, that's irrelevant. We're talking about the actual real world political power they have.
Yeah, and I am a person in the real world fighting against their ideology.
A losing battle.
I don't think you're helping, honestly. I don't think you coming up and saying you want to ban porn, you want to ban alcohol, you want to ban all these things are going to get more people on your side than on the cultural Marxists. Because people are going to look at your arguments and are going to go, oh, holy shit, if this is the alternative, I might as well go watch a Disney movie where they have black people dressed as aristocrats in France, because at least they're not trying to ban my liberties.
Well, that's just demonstrably false, because the alt-right, which has been advocating the points that Greg is talking about...
What is the party of the alt-right right now? Which are the advocates in the political spectrum for the alt-right?
Where are your political advocates in the political spectrum today?
There's plenty of political advocates in the political spectrum. Look at Poland. Look at Hungary. Look at all these countries that don't have the alt-right, and yet for some reason, mysteriously, also have alcohol and porn and manage to keep away the waves of refugees and the waves of cultural Marxism.
Did you say Poland and Hungary?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because they're Christian. 2 years ago, they declared Christ was king of Poland with the ceremony with the
they're Christians, and yet people in those Christian countries can drink alcohol. People in those countries can watch porn. Sure. And you know what? People can fuck without going to jail. How do they manage it? Astonishing, isn't it?
Well, no,
I have to stand by V's analysis here, even if I wouldn't necessarily use the word cultural Marxism, and I would put aside the semantics. V is pointing out that unjustified prohibition of some stuff has justified an uprising, and he's correct. In American history, the hippies, essentially, they have gained their uprising precisely because there were too many things banned. Yeah, go ahead, academic agent.
I mean, I've had this long-running theory because, you know, in my real life, I'm an academic, and I actually write it. I mean, some parts of I just written this book, and there's a number of chapters on the Reformation. And as I was writing this, it became really clear to me that like the Puritans were literally the SJWs of their day. Like they were entirely SJW. And I've got this theory that the reason that we have things like the Me Too culture, the Me Too thing now, and white guilt and all of these kind of witch hunts on Twitter is because that kind of Puritan culture has slowly morphed over time into SJWism, and it's exactly the same thing. And I have this idea that Me Too couldn't work in a country which doesn't have that history of kind of Puritan guilt. Like, I don't imagine like an Italian Me Too movement. Like, can you imagine like trying to stop like Silvia Berlusconi slapping Italian girls' asses? I don't think it would happen. I think it's very particular to a certain strain of Northern European Puritanism, which I mean, is there anything more Puritan than the concept of white guilt? It's just you've replaced the notion of total depravity, which Calvin had, with the notion of the original sin in this case is whiteness. But it's exactly the same mindset. And I was wondering if Todd or Greg would respond to this, because in what ways are the Puritans different from the SJWs? I mean, they're exactly the same. They're trying to tell us what to do. They're trying to make us feel guilty for all of our decisions. I mean, tell us how it's different.
In what way is Plato different from the SJWs on your account? Is Plato a Puritan?
Well, he's not. I mean, I think that there's always been this struggle. There's a really good book by Arthur Herman called "The Struggle for the Soul of Western Civilization" as being between Plato, who's a rationalist and basically totalitarian in his thinking, and Aristotle, who's much more on this side of empiricism and freedom.
That's a completely arbitrary distinction. It's completely not based on the actual political and ethical doctrines of Aristotle. Aristotle was just as paternalistic and just as oriented towards using the state to promote virtue as Plato was.
Here's the thing: it's in Aristotle, he allows more, I guess. He allows things to be a little more organic. He doesn't appeal to the philosopher king all of the time, or certainly the system of thought that comes from that. So I'm really surprised that people like you guys who are espousing virtue ethics are being such SJWs about it. Basically, I mean,
maybe what we need to do is come up with a better concept than SJW to describe the pinnacles of Western tradition in philosophy.
How about Puritan?
Because that's a small sect of Christians.
Okay, so Saint Augustine then, and it's all the same. I mean, Saint Augustine spent his entire life fucking, and then said, "Oh, actually, I want to become chaste now, and everybody else has to do the same." And it leads to all of this nonsense.
How about the police of vice and virtue? Would you be okay with that?
I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Christian at all in any sense of the word. And I think that going back to classical Greek virtue ethics and politics is perfectly justified. Nobody's come up with a better system of politics than Aristotle, for instance. There are certain modern thinkers like Hegel and Montesquieu and others who have added little details, painted the eyebrows on little things, made perfections and tweaks, but there's nothing better than Aristotle and Plato. And we need to go back to that. And if you look at politics in that context, it's based on biology, not arbitrary religious revelation. And it's oriented around creating a form of society where, as individuals and as groups, we can flourish and actualize ourselves. And that is a perfectly illiberal form of politics, because it doesn't make a fetish out of uninformed individual decisions. And when I hear people say, "Oh, you have to give freedom for people to make mistakes," that's so dumb. If people know better, why should you force people to make easily preventable mistakes and bear the costs of that?
Where is the moral agency? Where is the moral agency?
May I just say this, academic agent? This is important. This is a small little asterisk, but it's very important. The concept of moral agency that you are presupposing is actually a Christian notion. It's not something that's clearly present in Plato and Aristotle. For Plato and Aristotle, the education of human beings in virtue is on a continuum of educating dogs and horses. We're not moral agents in that sense. And the idea that we need to give people the freedom to be evil or good, I think that's a completely false idea that's been and guess who inserts that into the mainstream of Western thought and at the foundations of the kind of liberalism that you advocate. It's the Puritans. This is what you're advocating. It's the Puritans who foisted that idea on you.
After the whole Kraut thing, I made a video called "The Root of All Evil," and I used kind of Kraut's moral crusade as a lens. I have this idea that the root of all evil is exactly what you are talking about. Basically, people on a moral crusade trying to force other people into doing what they want. That is the heart of evil. What you are arguing for right now, Greg, is basically the root. I mean, it's tyranny.
This is what the communist
I guess what you're really saying is that Stalin is no worse than Greg Johnson. And that's an absurd position to take.
Yes, no, I am absolutely saying that as a person who lived in a communist society. That is literally the communist argument. This is the best way to live. This is the morality, we are going to advocate. It's for the greater good. So you are all going to be like good little ants in the ant hive, and you're going to do what you're told. No deviation, no nothing. The only difference is that you disagree with the system from, I guess, what it was trying to achieve. But the oppression, the fundamental taken away of rights, and the fact that you as a person just cease to exist and you are just the collective, yeah, you seem to be in favor of that, mate.
You're a utopian dictator, essentially, and that's what all of these different dictatorships. It doesn't matter if it's Mao, Stalin, or Ayatollah Khomeini. They're all the same. It's just you've got this vision of utopia, which is never going to be real. And you want to oppress everybody else to try to achieve it, and that is the heart of evil.
I'm gonna sneak in here. That guy T actually wrote something about what you were saying before, Greg. Sort of just about how you want to have like a healthier, lifestyle for the public. So you were suggesting putting tax on corn syrup, right? So that guy T threw in $5 saying, interesting how Greg jumps right to taxing corn syrup before insisting that we maybe stop subsidizing the shit. Any comments on that?
Yeah, stop subsidizing the shit
and tax it.
I would love to ban it altogether. But the point is that there are ways that you can decrease the use of certain harmful substances that are being used to adulterate our food. And I would be willing to entertain any reasonable proposals to decrease the amount of harmful adulterants in food.
Actually, I got a legitimate question for Greg, if you can allow me.
Just real fast. I just want to ask one more thing. Gareth Green, who's been throwing in money a lot, thanks very much. But he actually just asked for $10, Greg, why does it matter if people flourish or self-actualize or not? Why does it matter what happens to people? You are not a collectivist, but you still regard people as objects.
It matters to every one of us if we lead a good life and if we're happy. That's the meaning of all of our choices. Now, we may be deeply mistaken about what leads to happiness, and that's what makes it possible for people to come in and correct us. But there are certain objective conditions that will make people happy. We can be right about that or wrong about that. If we're wrong, we need to be corrected.
How about liberty as a precondition? Liberty is a precondition for happiness? Liberty as a precondition for happiness?
No, I don't believe liberty is a precondition for happiness. I believe liberty is a useful thing, but
I don't have like a question about this, right? What happens if people start leaving your country after you instated your laws, and people go like, okay, I don't want to live in the United States anymore, and so many of them leave that it starts hurting the economy and the people who stay there?
Tear down that wall, Mr. Gorbachev.
I wouldn't build a wall.
build
In
a wall-
fact,
you'd build a wall to
I
keep
would
them in.
give liberals and free market types first-class tickets to whatever degenerate drug
Okay,
utopia
but
they
what
want.
happens? All right, no, what happens when you have a situation like in Romania, where only the elderly remain behind, and the people who can't work but they're old and they need help, right? So your society starts to crumble economically. Other foreign nations starts trying to invade, and they're trying to conquer your land. What do you do if more people keep leaving?
Well, actually, I think that what would happen if we created a white nationalist society, a pro-white society with sensible paternalism, like I envision, is that we would have a flourishing society. One of the things that we would make.
Okay, no, I understand.
And there would
this.
be people with lots of kids.
But people are
raising
leaving.
their kids.
What do
in
you
decent
do? Okay.
communities.
By the way, guys, V, you keep interrupting. Greg
But he's not
Johnson is a
answering the
good
question.
speaker. No, but he's giving long answers, and I want to hear them. So just take the habit that when you ask a question, leave him space and then come back. So,
I'll
Greg,
try and be more brief. Yeah, but I think a central feature of any kind of pro-white policies is going to be affordable family formation, creating communities that are free of junkies and child molesters and tranny freaks and blue-haired cat ladies and the other kinds of people that make life uncomfortable for people who want to raise kids and educate them in a decent way. And I think that there would lead to a baby boom amongst normal, decent white people, and that we would not have these demographic problems that we're facing now under your liberal utopia, where people have lots and lots of freedom to lead essentially meaningless lives. And when they die alone with their cats, and all of their, junk that they've accumulated is just sold off. That's the kind of meaningless life that's led to by this cult of freedom that we have today, where people essentially become lonely and isolated and accomplish nothing and leave nobody behind. I think that's a dystopian horror. And that's the dystopian horror crafted by liberalism.
Number one, it's not the liberal society, and you still haven't answered the question. What if, despite your ideology, people disagree with you and they're leaving your nation, and it's hurting the people that live behind?
He did answer. He said that there could be a baby boom in the conditions that he creates, and he expects that even if some people were living in society, they would be replaced by people who would be more in line with the kind of society he wishes. I mean, he can correct me.
What if more people leave than there are born? That's my question. My question is, what happens if more people leave, like you had in, for instance, in communism, you had so many people leave that they had to raise the Iron Curtain. In Germany, you had so many people leave that they had to raise the Berlin Wall. In North Korea, you had so many people leave that they had to shoot people, right? We notice this time and time again. When a nation becomes incredibly invasive into the private life of people and tell them how to live, people start leaving to the point where either the nation collapses economically because other nations around it are going to try to invade, or they are forced to hold their citizens in through different means.
If that happens, we'll reevaluate our policies, but I'm betting that won't happen. And again, I think we're going back to these totalitarian straw men. What I'm advocating is not totalitarianism a la Stalin or Ceausescu or anything like that. What I'm advocating is a form of government that has existed in most flourishing Western societies up till recently, when we decided that we were just going to say fuck all and let all standards go by the wayside. I think that it's a straw man, in other words. We're not going to have to...
Hang on.
It's not a straw man.
And I'll just say one more thing.
Guys,
we're going to build a wall around America, and it's going to be there to keep people from coming in rather than going out. And a whiter, more prosperous, more decent America is going to be a place where more people are going to try to get in rather than get out. That's what I'm betting on, and I'm not worried about your scenarios because, again, they're premised on straw manning.
Oh, hang on. May I just say one thing? I think there's some people online whose drinking word of the day for this stream is straw man. So every time you guys said straw man.
No, I mean, okay, so straw man. You either say that adults are like children and they need the government to cuddle them, or you either say you don't want a totalitarian state, but fucking pick one, mate.
I'm interested in, because I do think it's important to have some intellectual charity on these things, okay? And I do think Greg raises legitimate points, okay? I mean, it is true that in Western society, you know, free markets are brilliant at generating wealth and prosperity and giving us lots and lots of things. Like my Steam account's got like hundreds and hundreds of games on it. I've got virtually unlimited choice, but you know, a lot of us feel like we need something more. We need, you know, the meaning of life is not in those material objects. That's a fair analysis, but to jump from that to, you know, Greg's dystopian state where he has to pay the likes of me and V to leave and live in another country because we don't want somebody telling us what state-sanctioned missionary porn we should watch. Or in fact, we wouldn't even have that option. We would have no porn. We'd have no drink. We'd have no, you know, he'd be like he literally told us he was going to force us to work out somehow. So essentially, what I'm saying is he raises some valid points, but he just like many utopians, part of the analysis is true, but it does not follow that therefore his conclusions and his solutions are correct, especially as so many of his solutions are top-down, categorical, philosopher king decision-making that has failed so many times in the past.
All right, guys. So we've went from bake the cake to total authoritarianism, and it was really a fascinating discussion. So now we'll invite each of you to do a concluding statement. Don't attack the others. Don't talk about their ideas, but what do you bring from this discussion? What are your thoughts on what we've discussed tonight? Starting with V.
Yeah, I don't think people are children. I think everyone listening here is an adult. And I think that people's consequences affect their own personal lives. And they sometimes will learn from mistakes. And people should be able to do, to live the lives as they see fit without hurting other people. Right. I don't believe in the nanny state, because the moment you give power to someone to be able to dictate what happens into people's lives, you've already gave so much power to a person. You have to trust that they will do the right thing. And not only that, you also have to trust that they will not abuse that power. And I'm sorry, but my grandfathers did die in order to give me the freedoms that I have now. So I have far more respect for it than for someone who didn't have to earn it.
All right, now Todd.
Yeah, I will say that in closing remarks here is that there's been a lot of under the hood assumptions and things that would be useful to hash out later, either on a future Worski stream or on other people's individual channels. I think also it should be clear that while Greg and I do agree that certain behavior should be regulated, we by no means are in total agreement on which those should be. That could be a possible future talking point as well. But the idea is, I'm still waiting to figure out how the United States from 1607 to 1960 was a Soviet police state. I would like some enlightenment on that.
All right, now academic agent.
Well, we started this whole discussion talking about positive and negative liberty, and I made the claim that positive liberty in the long run will always lead to tyranny. And I think this entire discussion proved my point over and over again, that positive liberty will lead to tyranny. So that's my concluding thought.
All right, and now to conclude, Greg.
I believe that positive liberty basically boils down to getting what you really want. And what we all really want is to flourish, to live well, to be self-actualized. Unfortunately, sometimes we make bad decisions that contradict that goal. And in those cases, we need the state to save us from the consequences of our bad decisions. And that is the basis of paternalism. And that sort of paternalism actually makes us freer in the most fundamental sense, which is getting us to the goal that we really want, which is self-actualization. I think for a future discussion, it would be very, very interesting to talk about the difference between hard power and soft power, because the libertarians and classical liberals always want to run to this idea of Stalin. Stalin. We heard a lot about Stalin. Stalin apparently is no worse than Greg Johnson. And I think that there's another kind of power that's pervasive in liberal societies, and that is soft power. That is power that exists outside of the state apparatus, that shapes our preferences, that deplatforms us based on lists created by non-state actors, that engages in censorship and propaganda, and it's massive and all-pervasive. And yet the people who live under the rule of this soft power, they find it almost invisible. And liberalism, especially classical liberalism, is blind to this soft power. They have nothing to say against it because their only objection could really be, well, if the checks didn't clear. That the fact that we have a society where the ability to shape people's consciousness and to shape politics and to shape political policy is controlled by unaccountable elites in academia and the media and so forth. That is something that I think we really need to address, because that's really where the classical liberals and libertarians are blind to the real forces that rule us. And if we're going to deal with the real problems that we face, we've got to deal with the real enemy. The enemy isn't Stalin. He doesn't exist anymore. There's something far worse than Stalin, far more pervasive than Stalinist hard totalitarianism. That's the soft totalitarianism of contemporary liberal society.
Very interesting. Honestly, it was very interesting to see where we, started talking about liberalist and got into this. I did change the title of the stream actually, because I'm like, whoa. Me personally, I'm more, into, not controlling people, but Greg, you did give me a lot of things to think about. And I think the conversation of hard power versus soft power is a very interesting concept to talk about in the future, of how would you control people, like what steps you would take to go into that state that you would like. So it's really interesting. So thanks for being on the show, dude.
Thanks to all of you for coming. So now we'll be moving in. And
I'm not down. Like that triggered me.
Oh,
that
God,
was like, yeah, I almost kicked you. So
thanks to all of you guys, and we're gonna leave only me and Andy, and we're gonna read the super chats before we go sleep. So thanks for coming, and see you next time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.
It was a blast having you.
Academic DM me, please, if you can.
Academics, please respond.
Oh,
that was interesting.
That was harder than I expected.
I thought
we were
authoritarian states.
Yeah.
I think it was like 5 minutes on the cake thing, and then it just went off. It was really fucking interesting. I mean, because I did not know Greg was ban, like he likes porn, but he wants to ban it, or the alcohol thing, or drugs and this and that. And I don't know. I've never really heard someone like that.
He was much more authoritarian than any of the white nationalists we've had. That was a surprise to me because I don't know much of his work. I didn't know it would be that hard. And for people on the chat who said JF is tired, he's closing his eyes. No, I wasn't tired, but I was like, Jesus Christ, we are really talking about the fundamentals of liberty here. And I was surprised by the discussion. I think we discovered a lot of positions that I wasn't even aware about. I'm really glad that it happened that way.
Yeah, no, because I mean, first when Todd, when he's just like, we should jail gays. I'm like, well, okay. All right, this stream has completely changed.
Like Todd had been on the stream a few weeks ago. He's the first one who brought me to this stream. The first Warski Live I joined was with Todd and Coach Redpin.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, Braving's Arun just said $5. I invited him to be on, but he was busy. He goes, wanted to be on the stream, but couldn't make it. For my take on so-called authoritarianism, please see my video, Know Your Place. All right. Yeah, we should definitely check that out. And Braving, we want you back on. And by the way, Gareth Green, who's been donating the whole time, thank you very much. Who said something very interesting before we start super chats, said something very interesting that I really liked. $20. Personally, I would rather die on the streets as an addict than live in Greg's society. Also, Plato and Aristotle. Oh my God, I can't say it. Use a new word. Aristotle. I know there's an Aristotle. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Thought in terms of city states, not large nations. Singapore works only because of its small size. I don't know. Does Singapore actually work?
I mean,
sure
I
it's
guess
very authoritarian. It's really
they have some
authoritarian.
noodles.
Oh no! Oh, Mr. Medicare just what's up, Jim? He just wrote Loki. Fuck you, Jim. No, I've heard the word a lot. The name. I know someone's combining the shit I can't fucking say.
Oh yeah, that would be beautiful.
Yeah. And do you want to start hitting up or as Jim says, pound through these super chats?
Yeah, let's do this.
Yeah. All right. Mike Warski, $2. Hi, Dad. Where's my other dad? Take care of your son. Yulfa Kowa, $2. Screw the cake. Can we bake the Jews? Jesus Christ. All right, here we go. Fam, I read that one. Larry Steele, $5. Martin Luther Kuhn was commie whose speeches were written by a Jew. Also, he fucked underage prostitutes. Happy MLK. We cannot prove any of those, I don't think. Spencer Caden, $5. If the bakers shouldn't have to bake the cake, should I be able to discriminate against during hiring practices? I also okay. If you say racial slurs, I'm not going to say it because Mr. Medicare is watching, and you never know what he's going to throw in a video. Hey, I have to use the washroom real quick. If I put it on screen share,
right.
you mind if you?
Yep, go for it.
Make sure if I don't have any porn on my tabs here. No, we're good. No, I was just joking, making sure if I didn't have anything private.
And I was surprised that we had some great admissions about porn today. That was fascinating.
Yeah, I know. It was really interesting. Here,
all right, so I'm starting at the top with Devil's Advocate. Hey, Devil Advocate, since you've been on my stream, I haven't talked to you at all. Good to see that you're still there. $5. In terms of bake the cake, I think it should come to necessity. If it's a power company, when no alternative is present, then the power should exist. $2 US, message deleted. Larry Steele, $2 US. You can't be racist unless you put up a sign. Lol. Yeah, that was an interesting turn of the conversation where academic agent essentially made the division between if you allow the person in your shop, then you have to sell him the cake. That was fascinating, I have to say. Pragmatic Culture, $14.88. That's a good amount. Academic agent is somehow a left libertarian socially, but a lolbert economically, the worst of both worlds, in my opinion. Boo Burley, $2 US. We need cake in the oven shirts. Oven. Striker Quiet, $2 US. Someone get this kid a sedative. I agree. Striker Quiet, $2 US. Wow, Soy Boy is fucking based, yo. This discussion brought us at so many points to soy and to good health and good eating. It was surprising. Anderson Paladin, $2 CA. Lock the gay away. Kevin Smith, $5 CA. Governments allow exemptions from military conscription, but every baker must make a cake. What the fuck? Larry Steele, US, $5. I hate trannies turning 4-year-olds into faggots, but gays are cool. It's not like allowing gays to be open about it caused by pussy. Anderson Paladin, $5 CA. Todd, if it's queer, the course, it's crystal clear Lewis. You guys are having some quality super chats tonight. Striker Quiet, $5 US. It's about their social behavior. Don't act like a faggot and we won't treat you like one. Keep your hands off kids and your tongue in your mouth. All right. Blackjack, $5 US. Can we get the distributors in here? Yeah, that would be fun at some point. Furious George, $2 Canadian. Is pragmatism dead? I don't know if it's dead. Larry Steele, $2 US. If gays are not bad, where did AIDS come from? Well, I guess that AIDS did not come only from gays, right? Andrew Howie, €10. I love cock. Well, it's good that I hope you feel good about having shared this fact. Jared Vance, $10 US. I just came in. Who is the 10-year-old and why does he want to lock up the gays? Striker Quiet, $2 US. Oh, I cannot read this one. I'm gonna need Andy to come back. So how are you guys doing on the Warski Ghetto? You guys are spamming the Warski Ghetto with all sorts of nonsensical chats. I am not surprised. This is exactly what I expect from people who cannot afford the super chat. Warski Ghetto has AIDS, Base JF, JF for King, Two Arms, Greg One, Monkey Meat, I believe. Validate My Existence, JF. All right, you can. I've read them all. You can go back to.
All right,
you can scroll.
Start it up. You're on this one.
Yep. The Striker Quiet, $2 US. Iron, epidemic of homosexuality, says academic agent.
And Striker Quiet, another $5. Homosexuals are. Oh yeah, I read. Oh wait, I have read that. Oh, I didn't add in. He goes, just as gay marriage has been normalized, pedophilia is following. I do feel like the left, like the regressive left, a lot of them are starting to somewhat normalize pedophilia in a certain sense. On certain articles and stuff. Not all. Hashtag not all, obviously. The Guardian, $5. Is Todd a closet homosexual? He sounds like a Republican who's running from family values, who was later caught with an underage gay hooker in his room. Okay. Sargon threw £5 there and wrote, Joe McCarthy did nothing wrong. Thanks, Sargon. I did invite him on the show, but he was tired. But he will be on sometime this week, I believe, or next week. He's gonna to
talk to Sargon.
Yeah, and he's gonna do the rematch soon with Spencer as well. Ascalus threw in $2, thank you, and M430D $5, thank you. That guy T, what's going on, man? $5. Little Greggy couldn't handle his first Bud Light, so now we have to ban alcohol. Jared Vance, $5. McCarthy found the problem. Pinochet found the solution.
Pinochet.
M430D, $5. A prohibitionist thought the same thing regarding booze. Conformity alone is no ponencia. Individuals have to commit to good choices. Larry Steele, $5. Yeah, legal opioids haven't led to more heroin abuse. Amir's head, $5. Question for all: what gives you the right to enforce your will as me as an individual? And that's sort of what I agreed with. JF, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm a libertarian, so I don't believe that we should leave it to the state to impede on anyone's liberty. The problem with Greg and what he's advocating is that you're going to have people arbitrarily finding that some things are good and some things are bad. And I don't agree that there is an objective authority that could find this for me.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was saying too. A K7, €5. If you read this post, your mother will die in her sleep. Because it's French. Salutation.
Salutation.
Salutation. GP d'un
compatriote français.
Oui. The Guardian, $5. Did this nigga just say prohibition was successful? I think he did. Fascist Stampede, $10. Homosexuality is being forced into the public. Oh, I read this one. Thank you very much. Come again to the north, $5. Greg must be Jeff Sessions' homeboy to spew such nonsense about drug prohibition. El Chenjo, $5. Andy, if it ain't gay, if he is straight, Warski at it again. Babao, $10. If you don't think homosexual is a good thing, then why are you trying to force people with a genetic predilection for it to reproduce? Won't this just gay up your gene pool? Did we read that one?
Yeah, we answered.
Yep. Circuit Quiet, $2. Don't read the data. Watch Train Spotting. I think he's referring to Greg, I believe.
I think that it's Academic Agent who quoted Transpotting as providing. It was his data to support his point, which was quite hilarious.
By the way, Train Spotting is an awesome movie. Daniel Irish, $20. Yeah, he's fucking fantastic. Did you watch a second one? It came out last year.
The first one was very imaginative in terms of the rhythm and the way they film stuff, and the rhythm was very stressful. I've never seen something like that.
Actually, I think it was the first time I ever smoked weed. I watched that movie and I'm like, what is going on? Daniel Irish, $20. Greg sounds like he's putting on a fake accent. Did you think Greg was putting on a fake accent?
I think it's the white nationalist accent.
There you go. That. He was Crowton-teeing it as Coach Red Pill would say.
It was Richard Spencering it, but I don't think it was fake. I think that somehow in the path toward white nationalism, you start saying white at some point.
Yeah. Tom Morrison, $5 New Zealand. Love the streams. JF, you the man. What's a good French phrase I can use to pick up a French chick in a bar? Love from New Zealand.
Well, you could say something like, vous savez, la danse est un des arts les plus fascinants.
And then
you start talking about dance, and yeah, she's just gonna suck your dick.
Yeah, that's how you do it. That's what you learn here on Warski streams. Erocata, $10. Should we bring back pre-Christian European religions into one? Oh, I read that one. Joe Britton, $5. Greg Johnson's voice creeps me out for some reason. Interest in Hero, $5. Bake the cake, bigot. Let me fuck your 8-year-old son, bigot. This is the liberalist's slippery slope. A Feline Enchilot, $10. Zeus is God. Guardian, $5. Some retard. Slavery is freedom. Truth and lies. Oppression is free will. Let the government choose for you. Dusty G, $5. For fuck's sakes, Andy, slow the damn chat already. I did read that, Dusty, and I slowed the chat right when I saw that. Thank you very much. CDR Rockwell's Ghost, $5. In relation to Greg's comments, I believe that hallucinogens are completely legitimate tools for actualization and self-understanding. Have you tried any hallucinogens before?
Yeah, I've tried. I wouldn't recommend them. I mean, it really made me insane for some moments, but I do believe that people should be able to try.
I've had some good times and some crazy bad times as well. Maybe a good stream on that would be fun one day.
Oh yeah,
yeah, definitely, and get some people who have done drugs or know about drugs. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
PK for the truth, $2. Ugh, let me on. I'll just for Greg. He is so wrong. Guardian, $5. Greg wants to people who are better than us to make our life choices for us. I wonder what he thinks of Israel. Maybe he's a spy. Screw loose another two.
The Guardian is becoming a white nationalist progressive.
Yeah. And thanks to Screw Loose again. Daniel Irish, $5. Would the soy boy stop moving away from his mic when he was talking? And then when I saw that, Daniel, I told him to stop spinning in his chair.
What the fuck was he doing to generate that sound? I mean, he must have been like...
Yeah, he was talking like this because...
it's like, sorry, I'm also creating peanut butter sandwiches.
Yeah,
and I'm talking philosophy on the internet.
I was gonna tell him to do it earlier, but I was laughing because all the comments were like suggestions on what he may be doing, and I was just letting it happen. It was funny. Stringer Quiet, $5. Soy Boy makes great points, but I'm distracted by the cadence of his volume. I imagine he autistically rocking side to side while talking. Screw this again, $10. Thank you. I can smell the individualism all the way from over here at my house. Amazing. I believe he was being sarcastic. Stringer Quiet, $2. Thomas Paine was Marx before Marx was Marx. By the way, we also had someone DM me who's a Marxist, and he wants to be on the show. Marxist, Jesus Christ, I'm fucking up my words here.
A Marxist,
a Marxist, a
Marxist.
Someone shoot me right now. Larry Steele, $5. Academic agent. The Earth free market is trending towards a global, fuck my lord, caliphate. But whatever. I think I may have read this one from that guy T. Lies. We elect people to govern. To government who can bring us power to further our self-collective interests. There's no inherent desire for better men than I. Screw loose another $5. These rights, that's what they did say with the Yakuza, basically. Stringer Quiet, $5. Would you prefer organized enterprises of criminals killing each other or gangbangers and drunks killing and raping people for pleasure constantly? The Guardian, $5. Does Greg echo when he walks? I clearly remember Prohibition leading to the rise of organized crime. Literally created Al Capone. It failed. A Frenchinator 2, $5. Let's help the white people by bickering with each other like little bitches. Like the little bitches we are. PK for Truth, $10. Let me on soon. I could have destroyed Greg's arguments about paternalizing decision making. Academic agent did a great, but is not a commoner. LOL. So it came off too in depth. Greg has made 0 good points. Larry Steele, $5. The fact that you people are scared of porn. Oh yeah, I read that one. Screw loose, another $2. V is still cancer. Malcolm from the North, $5. Do you even Aristotle, bro?
I have to say I was annoyed when they started like Plato, Aristotle. Like, define your stuff. Don't tell me Plato, Aristotle. Just tell me what it is that you quote from these people. They've said 1,000 things.
Or Loki. The Guardian, $5. I bet Todd supports Rhodes. I think he's a statist. Dog bath, $5. Adam, no beer for the queer, no weed for the heeb, no tentacle for the skeptical. Worski, too far, Adam, too far. The Guardian, $5. If Greg supports governments banning harmful things for society, then he must support Germany banning hate speech laws and censorship. Yeah, what do you think about that? Because there are
supports government banning harmful things. Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk to Greg about speech in particular, so I wouldn't assume his view on this. He seemed to be an authoritarian on some stuff, but he also seems to be a libertarian on the free speech issue, because he says that we should force Google essentially to accept any YouTuber and to not ban them for their IDs. So I guess I would stand with him on the antitrust and freedom of speech question.
Cool. Copper Spider, $5. People like Greg are why people like me drink. You are not my real mom, Greg. Cheers. I read this one. I read that one too. Brad James, 5 libras. Working class Brits were peasants up until after World War II, until the 60s, more or less. It wasn't a great society. Screw loose, another $10. Thank you very much, Screw loose. Jesus Christ. Some might say that Greg's are perfectly good waste of oxygen and we should ban it from him. The Post Show, £5. A religious Pakistan have kid dancing boys / whores at the highest gay porn searches, are the highest gay porn searches online. Oh, and do they? Is that a thing?
I don't know about this.
The Guardian, $5. Greg confirmed for nanny state. He needs someone to wipe his ass for him in order for him to function. Freedom means being free to make mistakes. A screw loose, $5. We need to protect porn for the modern feminist. That's how they make money. Malcolm threw $2 to say Andy Pornsky leading the Pornhub marches of 2018. Donald 12998 $10. Is the cake thing about the comment I made through Super Chat a couple months ago? No, it was about Sargon's referencing something on the liberalist thing he's making, but we got off track. The Crimson Satyr, $5. Hey V, why are you such a little fragile? Why are you such a fragile little ego that blocked me on Twitter? You clearly weren't interested in the debate, and I saw no reason to as well. I did send V your message, by the way. Joshua Bose, $5. It's Richard Spencer sounding a criminalize all things guy is what the founders warned us about. So quiet, $2. LOL, going below the age limit, 6 to 18 arbitrary. Of Flintox, $2. Can we all agree democracy is the worst system? Start quiet, $5. You can't compare porn to a Bernie sculpture of the Rhodes Aleocon and Kuhn and his sons. It's not about the exposure of the naked body. Do you want to keep reading?
All right. So we have white male, $2 US. When will Mike and Nock be on the show again? He was so great. Anytime.
Soon. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
John Lewis, 2 lira. Porn is a cuckold simulator.
Pretty much.
Okay. I guess that in a philosophical sense, you are correct. Problematic White Knight, $5 US. Porn is mainly run by Jews. V is a shekel-grabbing degenerate. Put 2 and 2 together. He belongs in love.
Oh my God.
Starts disliking these vids that V is on. Oh my God. We have an anti-V movement born tonight.
That's the Kumite as well. Oh, yeah. I know you don't know much about Kumite, but literally everyone is upset that V's on the show now.
Oh yeah. Striker Quiet, $5 US. For fuck's sake, man. Academic Agent is like Sargon of VHS. Have you ever watched Kubrick? The Guardian US, $2. That's not an argument, Greg. National Capitalist, $2 Australian. Air is $2. Beg the fucking Crash Pelican, $2 US. Ban porn. A screw loose, $5 US. Todd's absolutely right. America has been going downhill since August 18, 1920. Okay. That's precise. Ravagard Dragovar, 5 lira. Greg literally wants everyone to live under Sharia law, yet he wouldn't want to live there, follow those rules. Won't answer any questions either. Garrett Green, $20 US. Thank you so much, dude. Human beings are creatures with the faculty of reason and volition. So freedom means allowing people to make their own choices, even if they make bad or stupid choices, and live with the consequences. I fully agree. Laws should not be based on consequences to yourself. They should be based on if your actions impede on others. Larry Steele, $2 US. Chicken salad. Okay. $5 US. Message deleted by Andy.
Yeah.
Andy censorship Warski.
Yeah.
Party time.
Or anything a little bit like that goes beyond the limits of what should be super chatted will be deleted if it's a threat. So don't.
By Andy censorship Warski. Party time. $1,005 US. Would you ban soy? I guess that would be the first thing I banned if I was an authoritarian, but I'm not. Donald 12998, $5 US. My mistake. I said you can't unbake a cake as a pro-white nationalism on No Bullshit's live stream in November. All right. So Garrett Green, $10 US. Freedom means the right to do wrong and the right to be stupid and live with the natural consequences. People who are smart and moral will be more successful and can stand back and laugh at them. I fully agree. A screw loose, $2 US. Jeff, you're finally the least autistic person here. Yeah, that's how I felt today. That's why it was freaking weird. I was like, Jesus Christ, am I the only one who makes sense? Problematic White Knight, $2 US. V is good at strawmanning the chat and the panel. A screw loose, $5 US. V, keep your dirty dick beaters off the keyboard. People are pissed over here and chat. Okay. Garrett Green, $10 US. Freedom also means the right to act according to one's own beliefs, no matter how stupid they are. All right, we need to scroll. Oh God, we have another moment. Andy is gone. I am left alone with
So,
the...
is this still on? Yo, Jeff, sorry, I had a power outage at my
Oh,
place. So I'm signing in right now. Sorry about that, man.
cool.
A small little flash of power. So I'm logging in right now. It shouldn't.
We have a little bit of IRL real situation from Andy.
Yeah. So I'm
All
set.
pixelated.
They're upstairs that the dryers will work.
Oh.
I have to flick all the switches.
Okay, cool. All right.
Relax.
Yeah, no worries.
They're
We're good. All right, we're good. Thanks. All right.
Uh-huh.
I think we got like 5 minutes.
You can see that in the way Andy interacts with his girlfriend, she's more of an authoritarian.
Yeah.
So that's why Andy was feeling bad about this whole authoritarianism discussion. It's that Andy lives under an authoritarian state in his own home.
I'm connecting right now. I hope this goes. Come on, internet. Yeah, we had like a freaking, the breaker went off. Of course, that's what happened. Are you able to read? No, you can't read the super chats, eh?
Not really. I have one last super chat that is still showing in my live chat. It's from Ultra Grade, $5 US. When will we do the serial killer interview? You talked about Andy. Any other ideas for interviews in the near future on different topics? Well, I'll tell you what, we have a flood of people who are willing to appear. So the interviews are always going to be about... We're always going to see the subject from actual news event or from current internet events, and then we're going to let people go wherever they converge. And you saw tonight that we didn't plan that it was going to be about state authoritarianism, but that's where it converged.
All right, here we go. The box was just resetting there.
Yeah.
And let me log in here quick. There we go. Yeah, we have like a friggin' external heater.
Okay.
And she was blow drying her hair at the exact same time. There we go. All right.
Okay. Let me reopen that. Sorry about that, guys. Oh. Are you Christian? Someone's taking it that you're a Christian?
Me? I'm an atheist, but I subscribe to the Catholic tradition. I like the idea of generosity that Jesus puts forward, but I don't believe Jesus existed in the way he is described in the Bible, and I don't believe in God.
All right. Okay, here we go. Just looking for where that was. Here we go. All right. Share screen. Whoa, let me move that so people don't start flooding in here. And there we go. Okay.
All right. Where were we at?
I think we were at right over here.
I think we're at the top.
Yeah, a screw loose $2. JF, you're finally the least autistic person here. All right. Problematic white knight, $2. V is good at straw manning the chat and the panel. A screw loose $5. V, keep your dirty dick beaters off the keyboard. People are pissed over here in chat. Gareth Green, $10. Freedom also means the right to act according to one's owns beliefs, no matter how stupid they are. Larry Steele, $2. Fat niggas in the chat, salty, LOL. Striker Quiet, $2. If I'm paying for your healthcare, hit the gym. Gareth Green, $10. Man, thank you very much, Gareth. I agree about not paying for fat people's health bills, but why not just let the fat people suffer and die so they can be an example to others? Joseph Evie or Evo, $10. This is for having Greg Johnson on. Keeps a great work, Andy. That was JF who actually caught Greg Johnson on, so thank you for that, JF. Pirate Falagos, $10. Taxing a specific item isn't central planning. It's
that's not even a word.
Okay, someone's trying to fuck with me. Someone's trying to fuck with me.
Yeah.
Yo, if JF doesn't know the word, it's not a real word.
I don't think they would write it that way with the E at the end. Maybe. I can Google it while you read the rest.
Sure. Kevin Smith, $2. Bring back leaded gasoline. Party time, $1,000.
Oh my God, it's actually